Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. This is a meeting of the Gloucester School Committee. I assisted with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or device, there's a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. Okay, I ask that you all join me in this little.
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Say that the mission for Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, lifelong learners. The next item of business is oral communications. If anybody is attending that wants to speak to the committee, now is the time. And rules for oral communication are the public shall have the opportunity at every school committee meeting to be heard under oral communications. Oral communications shall allow any resident who has a request or complaint of any nature relative to the school committee business to appear before the school committee, state their problem without debate, and the matter may be referred to the proper subcommittee. For items that are on the agenda, members of the public may address the committee with the permission of the chair. Persons speaking under oral communication shall be limited to 3 minutes each and shall submit a copy of their prepared communication to the recording secretary. The school committee chair shall not allow complaints as to individual performance or character. So do we have anybody who would like to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to recognitions. And I think I'll start because our hockey team made it to the state semifinals for the first time in a long time. I think the whole community was behind them in one way or another, whether they liked hockey or not. And I think it brought this tremendous excitement and buzz. The team was really fun to watch. They, I think, impressed everybody across the state. I think Coach Gary's best quote that I saw the day after the quarterfinal was that, you know, Jack Costanza was the best hockey player in the state tonight. And I just thought it kind of captured just the talent that was on the ice in terms of all the kids. So bravo. Absolutely. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Keith.
Family Science Night at West Parish. Took my kids on Friday. My little 5-year-old ensured my 8-year-old that we weren't going there to learn anything, but maybe we did a little bit. They still like going back to school, but yeah, they made some toys. They're still playing with them, so it was pretty cool. I think it was the support of the PTO. It's special recognition for that.
That's great. Oh, you did do it last week. Okay. And I know we have, okay, so anybody else? No? Okay, the last thing I'll mention is I know there were 5 of our track team members who went to nationals, and Andrew Coelho is here for the Student Advisory Council. I see his name and I'm hoping he's gonna put on his camera. Hopefully. Yes, no. I have no way to. Here he comes. There we go. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, good evening.
We thought you would at least lead with your track news because you were one of the students and one of the athletes that competed.
He's driving.
He's driving.
He should not be driving.
Oh,
So we can do it later. I mean, it's up to you as the chair.
I'll be at my destination in like 3 minutes, so if you guys could just come back to me.
okay. Yep. You put your camera on when you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Good choice.
Okay. All right. Next order of business is the consent agenda. Does anybody have any items they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. Second. Maria, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verda,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
and Mr. Minio.
Yes.
Great. So the next item of business is deliberations on educational issues. And I would hate to have Emily and Anna begin their report to only be interrupted.
Yeah, I can do, we can do a couple of shorter things.
That would be
to
great.
Start off, yeah, no problem. Great. Let's get back to the beginning. So, I will share over here. In terms of tonight's update, I don't want to share this, I'd like to slideshow this. So again, our primary objective is to safely educate all our students in our schools every day to maximize learning, address our students' full needs, and support community and family needs. Tonight, we'll get a partnership update from the Gloucester Education Foundation in a little bit. A professional learning update from Greg Bach and Katie Provo. MCAS is beginning, so we'll just give you an update on the schedule for that. Code update, and then the heart of the matter tonight is the next step of the FY 2023 budget development, and that will be a review and approval of the public hearing budget. So we'll just jump into, I handed out and also shared with you earlier tonight the schedule of programs for the March 29th early release day, and Greg and Katie will help you we'll just describe a little bit of the great work that is planned for all of our staff to do next week.
Thank you. I'm not going to go over the whole thing. You can take a peek there, maybe just highlight a few of them. And I would be remiss if we didn't highlight one of the big pieces, which is, and Amy Kim couldn't be with us tonight to talk about it, but she's extremely excited about this presentation. It's at the high school for the full GHS faculty as well as district-wide clinical staff. And it's the co-author of Helping Traumatized Children to Learn and Creating and Advocating for Trauma-Sensitive Schools. Joel Restuccia will be presenting. Principal Matt Fusco, principal of the Veterans School, is going to be introducing Joel. And the book that Joel co-authored, according to Amy, is known in the industry as the Purple Book and has been responsible for shaping many programs and careers, in her opinion. It was the basis for the work at the Veterans School. A GHS student will also be speaking at the presentation to share her experiences and the kind of assistance she got. And also Scott Allen and Ed Jacobs, who spearheaded Handle with Care, are going to be in the presentation as well, and then training the entire police department that same day. They're going to give out 100 of the books, and I also want to mention that it's either co-sponsored or fully sponsored, I'm not sure, but it's quite significant by the Gloucester Health Department. So we just want to, there have been a number of things that the Gloucester Health Department has partnered with us on over the years, and recently they've been quite generous with helping with financial support of a number of things. So just wanted to share those. So that's one of the big ones. One of the other big pieces going on is we have the author of this book, the blue book, called The Knowledge Gap. And Natalie Wexler is the author. And this is very big in educational circles lately, and really is an examination of the American educational system and the role of content knowledge, deep subject matter knowledge, and the role in literacy and comprehension. And this is a book that our teachers requested to read and do as a study group. And we got Natalie Wexler to actually do the presentation on Tuesday. So she's going to be zoomed in live to the Maley Auditorium, and all of our K through 5 teachers who work with students around ELA. So that's classroom teachers, Title I teachers, special educators, anybody who's working with kids around literacy will be there. And it's two-part. One is to have a presentation from Natalie Wexler relative to the book that she wrote, and everybody will have a copy, get a copy of this as well. Part 2, and then some Q&A. And that sets the stage for the pilot update for the ELA pilot that you've heard about. That is the moment where the coaches and I will share. This is sort of setting the stage for why are we changing our, adopting a new ELA program that has at its focus a lot more of the knowledge building that we recognized has been missing. That's how the two are connected. We'll then spend an hour talking about our professional development plan, a rollout plan, what to expect, and those kinds of things. So that will be happening at the Maley Auditorium. And there's Katie. Katie, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about one of the big pieces that you have going on, as well as the ESP training.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Sorry I'm not there in person. I'm getting over a cold, so I've been wearing a mask all day, and I'm hoping to not spread my germs in person. So one of the things we've been really working towards is making sure that we are supporting our ESPs, with really some strong professional development going forward and meeting their needs for supporting our diverse learners. So we have a few options for paraprofessionals coming up for the PD Day. So we have visualizing problem solving from concrete to abstract for which is going to be presented by Nicole Bridge. And that is a Zoom session. We also have supporting ELs with special needs for students with in K to 5. Creating predictability and safety for our students in uncertain times. So we've been partnering with the North Shore Consortium and Jen Orlando, and she is part of what's called the Connections program at the North Shore Consortium. So she is supporting us with social emotional needs this year, as well as has offered to provide some professional development for our teachers in regards to really supporting with creating predictability and safety and routines for how we're coming out of the pandemic. So for our students that are in preschool and kindergarten and first grade, and really there's been a great impact around regulation, how they regulate themselves, how they attend, and what that impact has really had on their learning and strategies for supporting them. In addition, for special education teachers, and all special education staff, we do have Michael Joyce coming out from, he's an attorney that's going to be coming out and doing some tips and tricks and strategies for special education law, and really ensuring that we have strong IEPs that are developed for students going forward.
Thank you, Katie. I see Andrew's here. I just want to wrap this up, but thank you, Greg and Katie. What we have on the screen here is just a little bit about how it's organized. So you can see organized by grade span. There are programs that are specifically for teachers, special education teachers, specialists, paraprofessionals, administrative assistants, or school secretaries. And then, as you've heard already, aligned with many of the things that you've been learning about from us this year, and we're focusing on in terms of our priorities. STAR 360 program on that, literacy instruction at the middle school, and then the areas that Katie and Greg talked about in terms of moving forward in our support of special education students, and especially writing effective IEPs, and then tied to the literacy instruction, our ELA pilot, and also tied at the high school to tied and actually across many grades. How are we responding and supporting students during the pandemic? So really, very closely tied all year and the ongoing work we have. So it's really, when I first saw the plan last week, because Katie, Amy, principals, and others, and Greg work on this, I said, I really need to, we need to show this to you and show this to the community because it's so well organized, so thorough, so diverse, and so comprehensive. So I want to make sure you saw that. I'll turn this off. And because I see Andrew's there.
It's not a quarter.
Okay.
Wait,
Back trade, but today exists in the text of the bill trade. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's bad.
Andrew, thank you for coming.
Andrew, that was your fault.
Okay, nothing with that.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Andrew Coelho. I'm here representing the Executive Board of Student Council. And I'm just here to report on the things we've been doing in the last few days. We've had a really successful week at GHS. We started up MCAS testing and we had a successful blood drive last week. Throughout this week, we've been practicing for the NHS induction that is going to be held tomorrow. I believe we have 43 new inductees for NHS, which is really exciting. On March 29th, we're planning on doing NHS is planning on doing a cleanup throughout the day of GHS. And we also have the GHS Theaters Program Spring Musical Footloose. They're performing next weekend on Thursday, March 31st at 7 p.m., Friday, April 1st at 7 p.m., and Saturday, April 2nd at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. And as Ms. Clancy mentioned before, we had our hockey team that made a really good run in the playoffs and kind of brought that school spirit within all of us. And as she mentioned before, we also had our national team, our track team qualify for nationals. It was our sprint medley team and our girls freshman Sky Shalino. And that was really nice. We got to go out to New York and it was the first time that we had qualified for nationals in 5 years. So that was really nice as well.
Andrew, can you mention who's on the relay team?
Yeah, on the sprint medley relay team, it's Aiden Almeida, Sam Ashwell, Colby Rochford, and then me. And then Sky Shalina was racing in the freshman 400.
That's great.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Looking forward to NHS inductions and the spring musical as well. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
Good night. The next item of business, we will have a presentation from the Gloucester Education Foundation. Emily Siegel is the Executive Director and Anna O'Connor is the incoming board president.
So, hi, my name is Anna O'Connor, and I presently serve as the President and Board of Directors of Gloucester Education Foundation. I joined the foundation 8 years ago, shortly after I had retired from the Gloucester Public Schools after serving 35 years as an educator and an administrator in the district. Being a native of Gloucester, and graduating from Gloucester High, my husband and I raised our children here, and now we have grandchildren that are in the school. And actually this year we'll be celebrating 3 generations of graduates from Gloucester High School because our granddaughter is graduating. Yeah. So it's an honor to be part of this incredible foundation with not only the strong support that we have with the district, with Ben, with Greg and the entire district, but also with the amazing generosity and support that we have from our community that, that truly cares about education. And so tonight, Emily, our executive director, is going to be presenting some of the programs and the work that we've been doing with the district. So I hope you enjoy it.
Should I put the slides?
Sure. And do you prefer the group that I'm presenting to you or to the,
So,
I
think to us.
to us? Okay, great. Ben's gonna pull up some slides, but just by introduction, because I don't know all of you, I'm Emily Siegel. And I've been the executive director at the Gloucester Education Foundation since the start of the school year, taking the reins from the wonderful Aria McElhenney, who remains involved and a great support to me and to others at the foundation. I worked in education for 15 years as an after-school teacher and program director, and then in public policy across Massachusetts, but primarily in Cambridge and Boston. And then was working statewide with districts on school redesign work, as well as in a few other states around the country. And then I took a hiatus from education work to open a nonprofit inn and retreat center, coincidentally in an abandoned elementary school in the middle of the desert in rural Arizona. And I did that for 6 years, and the call of home brought me back here, and my family lives in Rockport, so being back in Massachusetts and settling in Cape Ann has been really wonderful. My son is a kindergartner at Plum Cove as of January 3rd, and my daughter will follow suit in a few years, so proud also to be a Gloucester parent. Okay, so I'm going to provide an update tonight about the work GEF is doing. I know GEF is very familiar to some of you and perhaps newer to others. So Ben, if you want to pull us forward. Just to share our mission, vision, and values as a refresher. So we serve to drive innovation, encourage creativity, expand student opportunities, and empower educators to improve teaching and learning in the Gloucester Public Schools. Our vision is that students in the district will be engaged in and enthusiastic about their education, prepared to reach their fullest potential, and dedicated to community engagement. And our core values that guide our work are leadership, integrity, culture of excellence, and community engagement. So since its founding in 2006, somebody asked the other day, when's our 15th anniversary party going to happen? And sadly, we had to be like, oh, that passed during COVID. We'll have to wait for the 20th. But since the founding more than 15 years ago, I'm so excited to share this figure. We've raised over $9 million to support programs in the Gloucester Public Schools. When I started in August, we were using the phrase over $8 million. And then we looked closely and it was over 8.7. And then I looked again yesterday and I was like, oh, we've had a couple good years of fundraising. We're over $9 million at this point. This year, our fiscal year ends next week. So these numbers are pretty solid for the end of our FY22. We're on track to raise over $616,000. And that's due, as Anna said, to the incredible generosity of this community, individuals, organizations, businesses, a few foundations, and most are based right here in Gloucester. So we're really a foundation of this community for this community. And I've just been so impressed with just how committed this community is to its schools. So to share some just historic program highlights, I think GEF has been well known as an organization that funds a lot of STEM and arts programs. Those have been our two main areas of focus over the past 15 years. See some photos here from the aquaponics lab over at O'Malley, 3D printing. On the art side, funding visiting artists to come into schools. You can see the acorn press from the old Folly Cove printers that's housed at O'Malley, as well as events like Countdown to Kindergarten that engage families and get students and their parents really excited about entering the Gloucester Public Schools. But I want to share some of the things we're doing now as we add on to the arts and STEM work that we're doing. So these are some photos from this year. So some current program highlights. I'll just walk you through these and you might see some familiar faces. Top left, this is the Gordon Summer STEM program. That's at the Beeman School that started as a Beeman only program and has expanded over the years with support from the Gordon Foundation to serve 4th and 5th graders in the summer doing STEM and engineering work. In the middle on the top there, those are Plum Cove students reading from amazing new books supplied by the Art for Equity program, which was GEF's first grant to a student, Mila Barry, to do a combination of public art projects and then using the proceeds to buy books by diverse authors of color, queer authors, and make sure that our school libraries and classrooms are stocked with really rich literature that reflect the students in our classrooms. On the right, you can see O'Malley Academy doing some hands-on cooking, healthy cooking with a partner of the Open Door. In the middle, instrumental music. We've been really proud this year. We've raised $62,000 to support instrumental music lessons for grades 4 through 8. And grades 4 and 5, that was really on hold during the pandemic, as I'm sure you're all aware. And the middle school band leader came to us in the fall and said, we're at risk of losing a generation of these musicians. There's no feeder into the middle school band program. And if there's no strong middle school program, there's no feeder to the high school, and the Dockside just doesn't have any experienced musicians. So we worked hard and scrambled this fall to find money to support lessons for fourth and fifth graders, and then also more individualized instruction for sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. To the right of that are kids in the auto tech program at the high school. The Lion Wa Auto Group just wrapped up a really generous 3-year, $150,000 gift through GEF to enhance the auto tech program. And not official yet, but they have committed to another 3 years to do that just recently. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. And that's to grow that program and allow for 2 teachers so that the students are doing more hands-on work, less looking and watching, and more actually getting their hands greasy and doing. Bottom left, you can see the digital photo lab at the high school, which got a complete equipment upgrade this past fall. And then lower right, this is the DECA kids, including Anna's granddaughter, who were at the state tournament. What was that, just 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
And this is an example, I think, of like the kinds of things we're funding, you know, as we're in and coming through the pandemic that are a little different than some of our traditional programming. But that the pandemic made necessary, right? So DECA, something that would normally be funded through boosters and student fundraising, that was really hard to do during the pandemic and continues to be. And GEF wanted to acknowledge that and make sure that all students have the opportunity to participate in that, even though it's not a program we've typically funded. So here's a full funding list of this school year thus far, September through March 23rd, what we funded, 21 programs. Some of the ones I just spoke about are up there. A couple other ones to call out. The new GHS Mentor Project is a new one-on-one mentoring program supporting juniors and seniors in developing post-secondary plans in partnership with Wellspring House. And that's been many years in the making and is finally launching. The new mentor training is next week with 15 community mentors that will work side by side with students here at the high school. The Gender Equity in STEM Club is up and running here at the high school, and through that, students of all gender identities are looking at careers in STEM fields and what are the gender dynamics that come into play that impact people's ability to progress in those fields. And is there one more I wanted to call out? The Mindful Toolkit. So GF has funded for a couple of years now, Noam Graham, who's a community educator, to do mindfulness work in the schools. And it feels like it's really nicely related to a lot of the other mental health and wellness work that that GPS is doing. But Noam has been working in 3 elementary schools this year. And it's a nice extension of something that had to be fully virtual last year. And now she's able to actually go into classrooms and work with students. So GEF in January finalized a strategic plan that's been a long time in the making, as Anna can attest to. And the work on this started last year, took a pause during parts of the pandemic, started back up again. And we've just finalized a 3-year strategic plan that really focuses in on the 3 areas of our organization. And I want to just focus on programs tonight because I think it relates most closely to obviously your work as a school committee. But up here are the 4 kind of big picture goals of what GEF is looking to do around programs over the next 3 years. And some of this will feel really familiar, and some of it I think is GEF pushing themselves to work in a different way as the organization becomes more sophisticated. So as always, we're looking to fund a diversity of programs, and I think the key words here are all students and active engaged learning. I feel like that's sort of the hallmark of GEF programs. Is a GEF funded program, you'll typically see kids out of their seats, doing, performing, experimenting, whether it's in the arts or sciences or another field. And we really want to make sure that all types of students and learners are being able to participate in those programs, including vulnerable learners, English language learners, special education students, and low-income students. The second one, GEF would really like to support 2 to 3, over the next 3 years, 2 to 3 really big transformational ideas. So this idea of like district-wide initiatives that cross multiple grades, multiple subject areas, and have this potential to shift district culture in lasting ways. And you know, GEF's early work, the C initiative was something that GEF did in its early years. That was a big district-wide science initiative. And I think there's a lot of interest in trying to get a few more big initiatives like that off the ground in the coming years. This third one, which I know is of great interest to this group and to district leadership, is just making sure that there's a really clear focus on the transitions of students as they transition into kindergarten, middle school, high school, and beyond. And so knowing that those are challenging points for students, for teachers, and for families, as a new kindergarten parent, I can attest to this, right? Like, heard you say 5-year-old. And so, you know, these transition years are so critical. And also thinking about the vertical alignment. What does a coherent K-12 experience look like? And what are the touch points along the ways of those key milestone years? So we were really excited that Greg submitted this great proposal to us, which was funded in full for this celebration of learning for 5th and 6th graders this June. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to the committee about that, but a really interesting way to bring together the 5th and 6th grade community in the O'Malley building, and to think about learning not just as teacher to student, but student to student, parent to student, teacher to student to family. So those kinds of programs. And then lastly, just making sure we're really articulate about the idea that we're always working in close partnership with the district. Ben, Greg, Anna, and I meet monthly. We talk far more frequently than that. This is my 3rd day in a row with Ben. And making sure that we're working together, that it's not transactional, right? That it's collaborative, and that it's not just for the sake of saying we work together, but it's really in service of one another's shared goals. So we've carefully followed Ben's entry plan and now his plan for continuous improvement. And we're making sure that we're supporting the goals of this district through the programs that we fund. So the next 2 slides I've only included just so people could have copies of them. I'm not going to go through them, but these are the other goals around external affairs, how we interact with the public, with the community, with our donors. And then the last one is internal affairs. How do we govern our organization so that it's sustainable, it's fiscally sound, leadership is stable, so we're around for 15+ more years to support the Gloucester schools. So to close, just thinking about our impact, I think people often think about GF's impact when that question is posed. It's like, how many students are served? What are students learning? What are students getting? Of course, that's important, but GF, you know, the impact touches so many different kinds of stakeholders in Gloucester. It's not just students. So of course, we're increasing opportunity for students to participate in those active engaged learning experiences in school, out of school, like in O'Malley Academy in the summer. But we're also empowering educators. So in communities where there's no Ed Foundation, where a teacher can apply and say, I have this brilliant idea and I want to do this thing, like that dream dies. So to have an Ed Foundation that encourages teachers to dream big and then can match those ideas with resources and support is hugely important. Attracting and retaining families, one of our big priorities is making sure families know this is an amazing school district. You know, Gloucester is a wonderful community, but also that the schools here offer things that are unique to the region and unique to the state. We always want to serve as a partner to school and district leaders, the principals, you know, department heads, Greg and Ben, can really kind of help them bring the outside the box ideas to life. Because of the constraints of a budget, the constraints of a work day, sometimes it can be hard to pursue those ideas. And we hope we're seen as a partner that can help you make those things happen. And lastly, I think we're an entry point for the Gloucester community into schools. We have a lot of funders who don't have kids in the school system. We have funders who send their kids to private school. We have funders whose kids have graduated. We have funders who are retirees who've raised their kids in another community. But people give to GEF because they want to support the schools and they see that as a doorway in. And so we really want to make sure that we are serving as that entry point for donors, for volunteers, and champions of our schools and our kids. I will end there, and Anna and I can take any questions you might have. Yeah. Oh, maybe Kathy will say that.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Not really a question, just a statement. So I was on the school committee in 2006 when Ed Shokir first came and presented to us with his idea for an Ed Foundation. And at that time, the economy was really not doing so great. We were cutting. We were lucky to get a level service budget, let alone a level funded budget year after year. We came forward with this idea, and now to see $9 million and 15 years later, you know, here we are still, and you guys are like so integrated into the school and the city. It's amazing. But as I said, back then, the purpose was to help fund things we just couldn't afford, or things we had to cut. And now we're looking at the extras that you're providing for us. So I think the next 15 years are going to be even better. So thank you for all the work.
Thank you. That's good to hear that historical perspective. As a new person, sometimes I can lose sight of the fact that this started as a little idea 15 years ago, under much different circumstances than we are now.
And I was an educator, so I remember
Yeah,
those days.
the hard times.
I don't have a question, but I just want to follow along Greg's lead because I've been on the committee 14 years. I can't tell you how wonderful, Anna, it is to see you again, because I
Same
haven't
here.
seen you in so
Same
long.
here.
And I am beyond impressed how this presentation tonight, it's like you two have been here forever. You know, you know this foundation, the way you're encouraging and talking about donors and things like that. It's like you've been here for a while, even though you're new faces, but beyond impressed. Warren Law will forever impress me as well.
Yes.
But there's a lot of good work coming from your foundation, and I can't even imagine what our schools would be like without that foundation. Because like Greg said, back when you began, we were making cuts in everything we were doing. And this was that shining light that came forward, and it's still here, bigger and brighter, and it's just awesome. So thank you, ladies, for your dedication, because you're touching a lot of students every day in the things that you do. So thank you.
Sam? Yeah, similar, I don't have a question, I just have a comment. So I graduated from Gloucester High School in 2004. And then the Gloucester Education Foundation came in 2006. So I look at these opportunities and there was nothing like that. You know, when I had a good education, but the enrichment opportunities were very, very different. And as a parent of a kindergartner and then someday another kindergartner in 2 years, I'm just so grateful that they're going to have those opportunities in this district, both as a graduate of this community and also as a parent. So thank you for your hard work.
Laura?
So I echo my colleagues. Thank you. I echo my colleagues, you know, everything that, you know, from Power of Play, which hasn't happened. I don't think, you know, there's so many pieces of what the Gloucester Education Foundation has brought to the schools. I actually do have a question. As a first and third grade parent at one of the schools, one thing I've wondered about is some projects go to some elementary schools and not others. And I'm sort of wondering how that's determined and why that is, and sort of how we can sort of equalize that a little more.
Yeah, I think it's a great question and a valid concern, right? To want to make sure kids are having equitable experiences across all the elementary schools. So in general, the way that projects originate for GEF, and this is by design, is that teachers come to us. Teachers or district leaders or principals come to us. And there have been lots and lots of times that somebody in the community or somebody on our board has had this great idea. And unless that idea finds a champion within a school, whether it's a classroom teacher, or support staff, an administrator, it's not going to get traction. So by design, teachers and school staff come to us with proposals. I think GEF can do more to get out and make sure that teachers are aware of the opportunity, aware that our grant application process is not a huge heavy lift. That's not to say it's not extra work for a teacher. And I think especially over the past 2 years, that's been a difficult proposition. But I think we can do more to make sure teachers are aware. I think that in our work, my work with the principals, making sure that the principals are really identifying, like, are there ideas and sparks that they're seeing that a little bit of a connection and a little bit of a push could get a teacher to actually apply for the funds. And then going back to this idea of sort of like the big ideas, the transformational district-wide, I think we're really looking for more of those. And I think we'll look to the district and the school leaders in particular to see, you know, what are these things with the new ELA curriculum rolling out? Is there something to supplement that that could help bring that literature alive across all of the elementary schools, for example, that isn't in the budget, but is something that we could step in and support. So I think it's both of those, got to come from both ends. And then, yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Great.
Does that answer?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation, Emily. Some things I wanted to ask you about and some things I wanted to thank you for. My son's going to be in 4th grade next year, so hearing about that connection between each of the grade levels, that, you know, with the musical education going, you know, progressing through the grade levels. As a casual musician myself, you know, teaching my kids to play keyboard and stuff like that. to see that there's an outlet for that at such a young age, I think is really important to foster that through their lives. And also I wanted to ask about the Gordon STEM summer program. Is that something associated with Gordon College?
No,
Okay, I was wondering what the Gordon was.
yeah,
and
no,
how that-
Gordon is the name of the funder.
Okay, yeah.
Good question.
And, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure, so, and others should chime in, because I'm still fairly new, so I haven't,
Yeah.
actually, I got to visit this program before, right when I came on board last summer, I got to visit it once. But it's a program that is housed at the Beaman School, is at this point open to students across the district, even though it originally started with just Beaman students, led by teachers. And is, Greg, are they still doing a series of 1-week sessions?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about, well, you're welcome to do the intro and then I can share a little bit more if you like.
A series of sessions throughout the summer with kids doing hands-on STEM learning using a Museum of Science curriculum. And I'll pass to Greg.
And over the last few years, they've done a series of 1 week over the course of 5 weeks. They've done sort of 1 week modules that students could sign up for 4 days. They are thinking about adjusting this year, maybe 2-week stretches, so that there's a little bit less coming and going. It's hard to manage. The other thing that I will note for this summer, that program expanded significantly last year. This year, it's going to not be quite as big, but we'll still accept and encourage students from all schools to come, but it won't have as many classrooms because, and this is good news, the Beaman School is projected to have construction happening on the modulars. So we're going to be doing some shifting of the some of the programs to West Parish. Science will stay there, but we needed to have a little bit smaller footprint for this summer. So we'll still have it open to everybody, but smaller number overall. And then hopefully build the foundation for just re-expanding next summer with more classrooms running simultaneously.
And the funder is somebody who made his career in engineering. So he specifically cares deeply about the engineering aspect of stuff.
Thanks. Thanks, Emily and Anna. I almost feel like I have to make a statement, but I really don't, believe me. Great work. I did write down a couple of notes. One of the things I wrote down is programs ever run their course? I mean, is there a review of the programs and you say, you know what, this really just doesn't happen?
Yes.
What does that look like internally?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, being new, I'm gonna speak from what I've seen and heard, and Anna can chime in. Anna has chaired our programs committee for a number of years. But there are certainly programs that are experimented with, right? Like there's some R&D that happens through GEF funding and didn't quite work, and maybe it can be tweaked and revisited and done in a slightly different shape. Or maybe either there isn't the demand, there isn't the need, or the execution just isn't where it needs to be. And then there's things that go on year after year and are improved upon. And we have some programs that we earmark funding for each year, like elementary theater. Every year in our budget, we have slated that each elementary school will get money for that, so they can plan ahead of time. They know that money is there. And it looks a little bit different at each school every year, but they can count on those funds. Chime in if you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, there's been programs that have been in the district for a very long time. Like, for example, the Mad Hot Ball that we always had for fifth graders, but of course, we haven't had that for the past 2 years because of, COVID, and it's not taking place this year because everything's been so iffy. So that might be one of the programs that might be looked at to see, whether that's something they want to continue with, or if they want to do something else that, brings the fifth graders in the district together. Yeah.
And the only other thing I had is I read about, when I first came on the school, I read about the mentoring program, which I think is a great idea. I mean, most of my associates in Gloucester are friends of successful guys that have done well in their lives, just excellent role models. And I'm always interested in programs that kind of serve underserved kids and connecting them to people that are successful as kind of examples for them. So certainly support that. if I twisted some arms and said, hey, I want you to get involved in this program with the GEF, what would that look like? Would I say, go see Emily?
No, thankfully you don't have to say that. So that program is really unique. It's a three-way partnership between the Gloucester High School Counseling Department, GEF, and Wellspring House. And each partner brings something a little bit different to the table. We bring funding and some support with mentor recruitment. Wellspring House houses a coordinator. Her name is Valerie Rafferty, and GEF helped hire her. James Cook and Laura Carlson from the high school sat in on those interviews, so we made sure we had someone we all felt great about. And Valerie is a Wellspring employee, but is here at the high school many days a week, and is the coordinator for that program. So she's vrafferty@gloucesterschools.com. I can send that to whoever I need to get that out. But people who are interested can go right to Valerie. And I will say, like, there's an application process, there's screening, everyone obviously, Corey, sorry, fingerprint. There's an orientation, as I said, which is next week. So it's a commitment, and mentors are committing to about an hour a week for 1.5 to 2 years. So this program's been designed really to build relationships between successful people in the community who've found success in a whole variety of fields, to inspire and coach and cheerlead and sit by the side of a high school student who just is tearing their hair out because they're not sure what they want to do, or they know what they want to do, but they don't know how to get there. And so Valerie will definitely be looking for mentors as this grows, because there's a lot of demand on the student side. The counseling department is in charge of doing the referrals of students, and making sure that they're supporting Valerie with the information that she needs to make the right matches.
So they're all set for now, is what you're saying?
I think they are, but I will check. I would never say no to a volunteer who wants to get involved. So I will email Valerie and check. I know my husband happens to be volunteering as a mentor, so I get the inside track on all of their schedules. So I happen to know they have a training next week. And we have a board member whose husband is also doing that, so husband's club.
Appreciate it, great, thank you.
I would just wrap or try to wrap it up by saying, I can't thank GEF enough, especially two of you representing them. You are our, GEF is our central partner. And for so many reasons. One, you are a tremendous champion of our schools and our educators and our students, all the great work that is done, especially great work that that GEF supports. You connect so many people to our schools and help them channel their desire to be connected, to support, to work with. You are a tremendous thought partner for us, for principals, for district leadership, and you also push us. You push us to be better, you push us to be more ambitious, and you always are pushing us to be, as you said here, to develop programming that's actively engaged kids in really meaningful learning experiences. And that is what we want to happen every day for every student in every classroom. And 15 years now, GEF has been just tried and true champions of that. So our deepest thanks.
Proud to do it.
And I won't say anything because I see you right.
I do want to acknowledge and thank Kathy for bringing the school committee perspective to us, for being really engaged in the work that we do, for bringing her perspective as a parent. You bring it all. It adds a lot to the organization.
Well, I think this is a perfect forum to let the community know more about what the foundation is about, as well as educators and definitely the school committee, so that they can speak as enthusiastic and knowledgeable as possible. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, you're welcome to leave.
Didn't want to be rude and pop out.
No. Onward? So we'll move on to just where things stand as we launch MCAS this week. Just give a committee update and a schedule. This is sort of this is the most basic piece of the schedule. You see GHS grade 10 ELA started this week, last 2 days, yesterday and today. We moved into grade 10 math in May, and then grade 9 biology in June. And And then grades 2 through 8 ELA, that is not March 228th, that's March 28th through April 29th. There's a window, that the state gives us a window in when to administer those tests. Typically, we go later in the window, but it varies. Greg is a big supporter of this. I mean, not a big proponent of it, supporter of our school teams and administration.
April 5th.
April, there you go. Starting with that, so we're going across all those grades within that window. And then math is essentially the following month, April 25th to May 27th, science, technology, engineering grades 5 and 8. It's not 5 through 8, 5 and 8 is that window's April is really the month of May. These are really demanding of school administration, teachers, of the whole school community, really, in terms of the focus on it, disruption to the schedule, the amount of time it takes for any individual student. It's not a ton of time, but across the whole school it has an impact, ongoing impact, especially you see at the high school for those days, it really shifts the schedule for everybody. But it's pretty limited for a couple days each month, whereas the elementary and middle schools are a lot more intensive, basically. So just want to you folks know that's part of the context of what folks are experiencing now or will be experiencing soon, and that always impacts just the normal routine. And anything that impacts the normal routine, especially something that is a exam like this, really impacts the learning, impacts teachers, impacts students, and sort of stuff. It can impact families, as some of you know. So I wanted to just make sure everyone knew that's underway, basically. Any
Can I ask-
questions?
Go ahead.
No, you gotta.
Mike, so Greg or Ben, is this the first year without the high school technology exam? Right, so there were 2 science exams in the high school that kids could take to meet the science. So if our students are not on the biology track, does that impact their graduation requirements from a state MPS?
No, and I wish James were here to talk about the nuances of that. I'm afraid I don't know the
But
details.
it's
of that.
not
No, it does
detrimental.
not. No, I know
Okay.
that for
Okay.
sure.
So I was gonna ask, probably in line with that a little bit, through COVID, didn't they relax a little restrictions for the MPS?
Not this year. We're good.
I was gonna say, so are we back to regular
Last year we
MCAS?
had the session lengths were reduced or from 3 to 2 sessions. We also were allowed to do remote last year. So those were the
Yeah.
2 big differences. And of course, there wasn't the accountability directly attached to it. So we are back to full
So this
accountability.
year, there's no change, it's back to the original.
Back to the
idea.
original
Okay,
format, length.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Moving on. So COVID update, continue to do our free at home rapid tests. The virus, here's the latest BioBot continues to go down. 3 weeks ago, we were at 180,000 samples per liter of wastewater, and now we're at 117,000, which is last Friday. Continues to go down. And this is probably the most reliable indicator across the community. Because as I mentioned before, we now have so many people taking rapid tests. Those aren't typically reported to the Department of Health, okay? Do a lot of reporting in our schools. Folks are good at letting us know, which is great. But only PCR tests it's only been PCR tests that have been reported to the state. And those used to be the preponderance of tests and now less so. So we have to keep a really close eye on this. You see an uptick here. 2 weeks ago, we were concerned about I'm not sure what the right uptick at the high school among a certain group of students involved in a certain activity. That's resolved itself, and we had kept close watch on it. I gave you a sort of update on what we were doing. We're doing a similar approach at veterans now in terms of knowing which classrooms or grades, contacting families, offering additional testing, letting them take home multiple tests to test, upcoming days, that sort of stuff, and also keeping a close eye on things. Yesterday, with the pool testing at veterans, we got the results back today. There were no new positives from the pool testing at veterans. That's a good sign. But there were a couple more positives from rapid tests today. So, so again, like we were doing with the high school 2 weeks ago, now keeping a very close eye on veterans. People are talking about this new variant of Omicron that's out there and more contagious. So, we're keeping a close eye, and we're doing just what I've been reporting, which is this week, Jeff Parker reached out to Desi to ask him about veterans. He's been sitting down, both yesterday and today with the nurse, with Karen over there, understanding, what grades and what classes, what information we can get from families about connections, okay, that sort of thing between students or staff. So that's the identified patterns and causes, and then responding. And the responding at this point continues to be, Matt Fusco communicated to veterans families yesterday, encouraging mask wearing, making sure they know what the status is of COVID in the school, and then also communicating with families and providing more tests and that sort of thing. And where possible, suggesting they get them signed up for either or both their pool testing, the rapid testing, and as well as giving them rapid tests if they're not participating now. So, I would expect we'll see that sort of process continue on. I will say this. If you remember when we had the mask discussion just for February break, I did highlight that a few weeks after February break last year, there was an uptick, okay? That's happened twice now. It's really the same time frame as a year ago. I'm not sure if that's a connection. It's just interesting, to note that. After that, cases went down for the rest of the year. Hopefully I hope that is a pattern we can follow, but we'll all keep an close eye on it.
So I'm looking at the bio report, it's really low. You look at the graph and we're on the bottom and the bed on the bottom.
Yeah.
So when I hear these words uptick, like uptick means 5 cases, not 50 cases, like it might have meant last year, I'm just.
Well,
I just see a
I'm
little-
specifically, for this, I'm specifically talking at veterans. When I say uptick, I mean veterans. Listen,
Yeah.
we went from 8 to 31 cases, in 2 weeks, that's an uptick, right?
Right,
But what I'm talking,
because it went up.
yeah, because it went up, yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to say surge, I don't want to say spike,
Yeah,
what's the
okay,
right
so
word
be
here,
clear.
Uptick, I'm that's the word, but I'm using it, because I don't want to overstate it.
Right.
But it's, as I'm being clear with you folks, like we're paying attention to veterans, that's a concern.
No, so I
Yeah.
get that. So I guess my questions, I'm trying to find the question.
Yeah.
So knowing that COVID is with us forever, never going away, so we're always gonna have this, because it's like the flu, we always have the flu, we're always gonna have COVID, that's a
Yeah.
fact, that's
Right.
out there, that's the way of the world, right? I'm curious to know what DESI regulations are now, like, are we still doing contact tracing? Are we at a point where, yeah, you can recommend a mask, just because people are getting them, so if anybody has COVID, I guess you would wear a mask around them. But I just wanna make sure
No,
that we're not, what, the CDC isn't requiring masks, nobody's requiring masks, so I just kind of want to stay on that path and not getting parents upset. But at the same time, report what's actually happening.
Yeah.
So what regulations does DESI have over this point? Like, you're calling DESI, is there a certain benchmark where they
Oh.
say, put the masks on, shut the schools down still?
Yeah.
Or are we
Good
beyond
question.
contact tracing, all done with that, and it's just a matter of,
Yeah.
okay, a couple kids have it, you might want to wear a mask?
Yeah, so we called DESI in this sort of situation for 2 reasons. One, access from them to the Department of Public Health and epidemiologists in case we need that. Okay, so the first 2 questions to DESI's or our contact there is, anything else we should be doing, like to report what we're doing, anything else we should be doing? And do you think it's worth either getting state testing in here, okay? Or also talking to epidemiologists. And that's where, that's sort of like, that's what's happening. Any thoughts, suggestions, what else to do, really? Okay. In terms of any sort of regulations from DESI now, it's all encouragement, encouraging distancing as possible, okay? And some classes do that, some classes don't, and they sort of vary. In terms of masks, that is still, whether it's COVID or other airborne diseases, masks help reduce that. Okay, they don't eliminate it, okay, but they help reduce that. It's commonly, as I've described, is commonly used in many other countries in terms of when folks are recovering from illness or have illness in their home. So we suggest that, and that's still, I think we will continue as we have COVID here, as a practice that families can choose if they want to. And that's consistent with what folks decided and what we've been saying all along. It's not a mandate, it's a suggestion, and it's that families have.
So do you see this as a suggestion forever now?
Well, I know you mentioned flu. I don't think, that COVID is where flu is yet, especially because we've been here before and COVID, did things differently. So, and it certainly is, has been deadlier than the flu. Don't know where it is now. So I think it's really prudent for us to remain vigilant until there's more time. I mean, we're not far away from the most serious, number of cases we've ever had. I mean, it's recent past, so that's the difference, I think, is because we don't know where this is headed. Flu, I mean, again, I'm not a public health official, but flu is very consistent and has been for years, in terms of what we expect, what happens. It's deadly as well, especially among older folks, as we know. But it's a much more consistent, my belief, my thinking here, again, I'm not a public health official, it's a much more consistent disease that we have much more familiarity with.
I was just trying to gauge you to see if we're on a path where you're gonna be recommending masks because there is a flu outbreak and things like that. Like, in other words, are you suggesting that recommending masks is gonna be in the schools forever, depending on the illnesses that are coming at us? I know we don't know enough about COVID right now. It hasn't been here long enough.
I think, I don't know what some of the lasting impacts of COVID, of this pandemic have been, and one of them certainly could be that in our society, people just have more of a common practice of wearing masks when they have illness or recovering from illness, I don't know that, but for the time being, especially this year, we'll continue to encourage folks as an option for them, if it's for them and their family.
Thank you.
Ben, quickly, veterans, is the school that they're in, St. Anne's, is that footprint smaller than the rest of the school? I mean, are those kids packed in more than at the other schools?
Not in the classrooms necessarily, the classrooms are a good healthy size, large size, it's instead of, you think about our elementary schools and what they have been, like Veterans, for example, they're spread out on one floor across a bigger footprint than St. Anne's, and it's built up, obviously. The hallways definitely are tighter, that sort of thing. But if there was any, I think this is true, okay? If there was any issue with the building, I think you would have seen veterans, having trouble all year long, and they just haven't, they're no different than, in fact, maybe better off than some of the other schools, honestly. Yeah. Okay. Here you just see the number of cases, so 31 cases, that's comparable to where we were sort of, late November, early December. We mentioned that already. So in-school vaccination clinics, not a lot of folks, 43 people total. In-school vaccination clinics, that's a combination of first shot, second shot, or the adults most likely were boosted, sort of thing. And then we're going to move on to the 2023 budget.
Laura. Just a quick question on testing. Have those numbers, the pool and the rapids, have those numbers been sort of stable?
Yes, we checked the numbers today. In terms of registrations, it's pretty stable. Vaccinations is stable definitely as well. This week, there were 831 swabs. So 830 individuals, tested on Monday, Tuesday. Sorry?
Staff and students?
Yeah, staff and students, right, staff and students, and there are 5 positives across all those. So of the 31 people you see that I just reported, 5 of those came from pool testing this week. That's a 0.6% positivity rate of those folks who were tested.
And we still have, so if it's about, we have about 50% involved in testing. That was where we were.
50% of students, involved in the rapid testing.
And what about the pool testing?
In pool testing, this number, 831, was negatively affected by the MCAS at the high school. Folks were in the middle of testing. So I think we have about 1,000 people, more than 1,000 people registered. It varies how many folks are tested each week, basically.
So basically half of our.
No, probably about more like a third is probably tested each week in terms of pool testing.
Okay. So, but I'm saying as a district, we're somewhere around half of our students and staff being tested weekly.
Yeah, if you know, I don't know what the Venn diagram is literally between
Right.
rapid testing and
Right.
pool testing, but I think somewhere around half is perhaps right. You know, you think 1,400, in terms of rapid testing on staff is over 440 folks at least. Okay, of 630, so we're above half on that.
Right, so,
Okay,
so
in terms
the,
of students signed up, I think we're at 1,400, I think, and that's half. So in terms of rapid testing, we're right around half, I'd say, if I remember correctly, and pool testing is about a third, so I think that's, you know, if you look at both those combined.
okay, thank
All
you.
right. Okay, moving on to the budget. So a lot of this is similar to what the full committee saw a few weeks ago. So, you know, the bottom line hasn't changed. The basic approach hasn't changed. I'm still working through some details, but the numbers are very comparable. So just, I'm going to give you an update first on the plan for ongoing improvement, because as I've talked about, the budget's linked to that and always will be, okay? So I just want to give you a quick update on this, which is, I'll tie in later, I promise. The process to date, in terms of our plan for ongoing improvement, just a little background, September is when I presented my entry plan to the committee and the public and the schools. In October, and that kicked off the process for developing the plan for ongoing improvement, the 3-year plan. In October, we had parent leader and community stakeholder groups provide input on the key priorities. November through March, I met with staff at each school, typically myself, Katie Provo and Greg Bach, with support from Stephanie Lisi, met with folks. We met with more than 120 staff across all the schools. And they shared input on on key priorities. We asked questions related. Sometimes there are, I'll give you one example. One question we asked across all schools was, actually 2 of them, was how can we best support student social emotional learning and mental health? Okay. Another one was how can we better connect general education, special education? But then different grade levels or grade spans had some that were, you know, closely aligned to that particular grade level. I'm trying to think. We asked one thing we asked at the preschool, and you'll hear more about this, is about the building. Okay, the school committee asked us in the fall to get information input from the staff there about the buildings. That's one of the questions we asked them. So a lot of good input on that. At the high school, it was tied to their sustainable improvement plan. So one of them was asking about, you know, how can we make sort of sustain a deeper hands-on learning happen more systematically in high school. That's a rephrasing of what actually was on the paper, but that's tied to a sustainable improvement plan. Whatever the topic was, we asked essentially 3 questions in this, which is, what are we doing now that's strong that we should continue or make stronger? What should we stop doing, and what should we start doing? Okay, so whether the topic was special education, or the topic was about interventions, or the topic was about a building, or the topic was related to social emotional support, those were the 3 questions asked about that topic. These happen after school, outside the school day. It was optional for staff, not wanting to require them to come to you know, additional meetings. But I had some good turnout across the schools. And one thing that was consistent across the schools was that the folks who were there were incredibly helpful, incredibly thoughtful, and just really just help move our thinking, you know, forward, basically. Now the work, we've got 5 planning teams of staff taking input and identifying goals and initiatives and actions to take over the next 3 years. So they're taking all the input, they're taking the knowledge they have of the schools and district, you know, they're taking the input from the staff groups. And they're looking at 5 different areas. And we have 38 folks across those 5 teams, plus all the principals doing it. Yeah. And so, and that's, you know, school secretaries involved, ESPs are involved, coaches, psychologists, counselors, and also teachers as well. So really good across all schools represented. These are the planning teams. So these will strike you as familiar. Better connecting general education, special education, strengthening mental health support and social emotional learning, strengthening special education team processes. These are really come from the priorities that Katie Provo explained to you folks during the budget process. Engaging students more deeply in learning. So that's the idea of moving students from dependent to independent learners over the course of their career in school here. And then the last one is deepening the connection between students, families, and schools. So how do we really make sure that students want to come to school every day? Okay. That last one I'm leading, and that's with our principals and leadership team are engaging in that. They're the sort of team that's focusing on that. And I had a great session with them this morning. What folks are working on, and so there are some key questions or sub areas in each of those. And then each team is using this template. And you can see that, so what they're going to identify with the goal and future state in that area. What are we heading towards in that area? They'll always will identify what's already in place. Okay, as I've mentioned again and again, we've got a strong foundation in these areas in our schools. We're not building from scratch. Key initiatives, those could be to continue, and most places will have initiatives we're continuing. Okay, we're doing some great things in a lot of these places, and some to start. We'll have measurements of success, and then I think probably not the most important piece, but actions for the next 3 years. Okay, and really, really important that those actions. We do not want a list of 15 actions in each area, in each team, okay? That cannot be done reasonably. And I've mentioned this to you before, is we need to create a plan that's achievable, that's clear, and actually helps drive us forward rather than overwhelming us or is easy to dismiss because it's unrealistic. So the idea is that it also isn't new actions every year. There are plenty of things that need a number of years to work through. So that's how we're organizing it, and that's the progress we're making so far. Okay. So that ties the budget because after we get that in place, we're using some of that in the budget process this year, but it really will be very closely tied to the budget in upcoming years. So to jump in here, as we said before, guiding principles for FY23 budget development are the ongoing plan for ongoing improvement, based on our priorities for student learning, student support, and high quality instruction. Moderation and financial prudence. A really big piece for us this year, as all of you know, is improving recruitment and retention of staff, and that's in a variety of ways, including increasing our salaries. And building a budget with an eye towards FY25 when federal relief funding ends. Okay. So those are some of the key areas here. This is in terms of the process. So we completed the yellow, we're on the green, and we have those ones below the green to go. But what this speaks to is the many steps of the process, the collaborative nature of the process, beginning with our work with our school and district leaders, and then working with the committee, the subcommittee, being a subcommittee, and now the full committee, and then moving towards tonight is the next step in terms of including the public as well. We do want to anticipate a budget that allows for sustainable growth. And that always matters, and that matters when we're negotiating contracts. That matters when we're looking at ESSER funding and what we have now and what we won't have in a few years. It's also about making sure that we're conscious of sort of very typical increases in costs we can expect every year. I'll go into those in a moment. And that, of course, all of that, we want to build budgets that support ongoing improvement in student learning and instruction and engagement. We can't do that if we're lurching up, down, or sideways in our practice or in our budgets. So when we get to this financial section, so we're going to just go over a few of the key things that are the main drivers of changes in the budget. And really what I mean by changes is increases. And when there are increases in these, it impacts what we can do in other areas. And these are the places we anticipate and expect increases typically every year. So I mentioned earlier about salary adjustments to attract and retain staff. So we had a sort of similar approach across our labor negotiations where it was trying to increase starting salaries and then also make adjustments where necessary. So you see, this is for the GTA and the teachers. Adjustments need to be made in athletic coaching and some stipends. We also wanted to prioritize increasing course reimbursements for areas of need, like in terms of special education and English language learners. And then also wanted to make sure that folks get a top salary in a reasonable amount of time as well. Similar in terms of operations and support staff, we eliminated bottom steps and raised salaries significantly, particularly in areas like food service, paraprofessionals, our school secretaries, those areas. Wanting to make sure that we're competitive with our districts, with our neighboring districts and our dark districts. So in terms of dollars, in terms of compensation, these are teacher compensation changes you see across the various areas. Typically, there's some retirement savings every year, so you see that included there. That helps us balance the other increases a fair bit. And that's because folks retire at a higher salary and we typically replace them with folks who are younger in their career and therefore have salaries that are lower. Another area of change in the budget, and this is in addition, is we're taking some of our ESSER positions as we described in really 3-4 key areas and absorbing them onto the operating budget. Typically, we could, in terms of these days, we could perhaps add some positions. We are not adding positions because they're here this year, but by putting them on the operating budget, we're making them more permanent or more stable. And these are, I'll get here, ones we talked about, and ones we're already seeing significant, real improvements from these folks and the great work they're doing. You heard from Amy Kam and how she's able, in her leadership position, to strengthen the support of our clinical staff, especially in this day and age. And I don't mean just pandemic. So many ways our world has changed, especially for our young kids, our students, in terms of their needs and their social emotional learning skills, but also mental health support. So that's made a big improvement. And then also looking at our kids who are most in need, special education, really having better coordination and support for our teachers at the high school, but also improving coordination and support of families and their students through better leadership and really more capacity in special education at high school. Adjustment counselor, certainly O'Malley is a place that is just that age, especially this day and age, the age of social media and all sorts of things in the pandemic. Is challenging. It's a turbulent. I haven't been a middle school teacher myself. It's a turbulent time, and certainly the new adjustment counselor at O'Malley has been helping. Sort of just just helps every day in supporting individual students and large number of students. The transportation manager, as we talked about before, really such an important role in terms of redundancy and support for our busing operation. Without that, the transportation director's job is they're out there on an island. And an island when you think about one of the, driving in our world is one of the most dangerous things we do, and so to have safety and support and focus on training and really doing great systems there has been a tremendous help. And we have a great team there now with a manager and a director. Those are sort of the biggest addition to the budget by absorbing those positions from ESSER to the operating budget. Health insurance is always an area where things go up. And when you combine the employees and our retired employees, that's an increase of about 5.8% this year, to the tune of almost $400,000. Our out-of-district tuition, another significant driver of increases in our costs. We're having some adjustments there. And actually, our out-of-district tuition budget this year, because of circuit breaker aid and our prepaid tuition offset, we actually will have reduced overall costs for next year. That's because we're able to make investments this year, as well as having circuit breaker aid come in at a higher level. Even though the costs go up, the tuition goes up, the costs during FY23 are slightly lower by $90,000. So this is a summary of the significant adjustments. I've gone over most of them right now already. This is sort of a summary table. One thing you see here is something we're shifting to ESSER, which is K-5 math curriculum materials. So we're going through as you remember last year, did the Math in Focus update and review. So those are sort of, they're not one-time funds, but they're sort of limited funds that we're putting on ESSER for next year, and also providing instructional apps related to math as well. So they're sort of short-term operational pieces, instructional pieces that can go on ESSER for a short period of time. And then here's the budget by department. It hasn't changed from what you saw earlier. Some of the increases are due to staff increases, which are, affect different schools just in terms of size of school or, who works there. Professional development, you see that's a decrease of 27%. That's the dollars we shifted to ESSER for a year. That's what that amounts to. And then athletics, that increase there is due to, remember, as I said earlier, the increase in athletic stipends. So and that all amounts to, as we said, $1.35 million increase from last year in terms of our operating budget, and 2.96% increase. There's the summary right there. And then here's our per pupil. We have our DART districts on here and also our local districts. Continue to be in the middle of this, which I think is the right place to be. Above the state average by a little bit. Also, I think a good place to be. And then here's sort of historical numbers in terms of where we've been in terms of increases in the operating budget over the last 8 years or so. Comparable to FY16, a little bit down FY18-19, and then some very comparable to what we've been within a 1/10 of a percentage point over the last 4 years. So we'd like to be, that's a consistent area of sustainable growth, we believe. This is what you'll be voting on tonight, which is, really, it's this same chart here. Okay, this actually has the language of the vote. Before we get to that, I just want to make a connection to some of the things we're continuing to work on. Because we have ESSER, we have an ability to be a little more flexible with the budgeting right now, okay? And the primary reason for that is by moving those 4 positions from ESSER to the operating budget has opened up some dollars, not only next year, but the year after. So it opens up dollars in ESSER, for total basically, to the tune of about $800,000 because FY23 and FY24. So we have a little more flexibility as we go through the budget process of identifying some things that we may be able to do or need to do. And I just want to talk about a few of those now because they're sort of still a work in progress. This is what I shared with the building and finance last week. So I mentioned about our priorities and our guiding principles. They're on top here. So the first 2 to look at are building a budget with an eye towards FY25 and then moderation of financial prudence. So this is really what I just said about continuing to work through our various sources of funding, Chapter 70, funding from the state, various federal grants and state grants, some of which continue to come to us with additions because of federal relief funds. So there's the ESSER funds, but then also the state got additional funds, went to the State Department of Education, and they develop grants or add funding to grants that we already have access to. So that's another way our funding may vary or possibly increase some. And so those are areas that we're still working on basically because they are changing in flux, which is a little different than normal. In fact, you'll actually see some increases tonight in one of your grant approvals. So in terms of what we're continuing to look at is how do we support the O'Malley Sustainable Improvement Plan? They're going to be working or continue to work on, can they make schedule changes to perhaps potentially lower class size or areas of their math curriculum or literacy curriculum that we can do either through operating budget or through ESSER, that sort of thing. Operation support at GHS, and that's so the principal can really continue to lead and deepen his leadership on the sustainable improvement plan, especially around the areas of instruction. This continues the work we've done with Amy Camp's position and Lisa Williams' position, as so many folks have gotten up and said about just the leadership of the high school and having further support there. And that also ties into the CBTE director program as well, trying to build that team so it's more of a team instead of just a few people. And if we can do that this year, if we can identify how to do this for next year, that really I think sort of completes some of the build out of having a really strong administrative team that sort of can run on all cylinders rather than relying on heroic efforts from a few people, which is really, I mean, it's happened because of the pandemic, but also, you know, it's built in structurally to some degree. So that's a work in progress. And also something that we've been working on is we talked about the ELA curriculum and again tonight, and what a big change. And really next week, talking to all the teachers in K-5 who work on English language arts about that little significant change that's coming for them. So we're thinking hard about how do we get support across the schools to make sure that's done well. That's an organization that's working very closely with Greg because that is such a significant shift in the way folks teach really. It's built on the foundation we've been working on, but it's a real shift. And it's not something that we can afford, nor can our students afford for us to do poorly. What I mean by that, doing it poorly would mean we're not supporting our teachers well in doing it. We're not giving them the time, or giving them instruction, or giving them time to work together. We're just telling them to go do it. If we did that, it would go it just would be bad effort on our part, and it would go and make it much more difficult for them. So, and then we talked about instructional technology a number of times, and how can additional federal grants and or ESSER support those areas. So, and then a few of these are just EL. You look at EL support. Continue to look at nursing capacity at the high school. We will be continuing the increased capacity 0.6 here at the high school that we were able to increase this year. And then shifts to preschool that move us toward more inclusive practice and full day programs. So those are things that are in the works. And if we're able to do any of that through ESSER or other grants, we'll be some of the first folks to know. But tonight is really, I want to just give you that full picture. Tonight, though, it's just on the operating budget. Those first slides I showed you, that you've seen before, that where we have accounted for some of the changes and the ups and downs. And then this is ultimately that budget. You also have that in the packet. Let me pause there. Thank you for your patience, and I'm happy to answer questions with Gary's support.
I was looking over this, knowing that we're supposed to be in the new building for veterans combined with East Gloucester in fall 2003. Why are there separate lines for both of those schools?
Because it's not happening till fall 2020.
Okay, yeah, so I mean, like that's
20, yeah.
I mean, I see fiscal year 2023, so that doesn't start in the fall.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the fiscal year for us begins July 1st, 2022, and goes to June 30th. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so
it's not the calendar year. Our fiscal year, again, sorry, is June 1st, sorry, July 1st, 2022. Fiscal year we're talking about here, fiscal year 2023, goes July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023.
Okay.
So it's 6 months and 6 months.
And
yeah, so it's really the school year.
Follow up would be, I'm hoping we'll save money by combining those schools.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Typically, we won't see savings in the first year, but that's something we're actively working on. We're working on the integration of those two schools in a variety of ways, programmatically, looking at leadership, looking at staffing and sort of stuff. Bringing together two different cultures and two different staff, okay, who have worked in very different ways for many years, okay, and then obviously the budget is a piece of that as well. So yeah, that's ongoing work that we're already engaged in. Thanks.
So my question, I don't really want to go backwards, but this just came to my mind, and I don't know if it's a conversation for a BNF meeting as opposed to here. So if I ask a question, you can't answer it, I understand.
Yeah.
So I read in the paper the other day about how CADA was able to operate on good gas prices because they had negotiated a good contract. And I'm wondering, I just don't know the answer to this question. Do the schools negotiate a contract for gas and heating and things like that? And if so, are we taking into account that the price is gonna be possibly higher going into next year? I mean, you might not have the answer to that, but it just dawned on me that.
I know I don't have the answer to that, but
Yeah.
Gary Frisch might.
And I'm looking at Gary when I say this, I
Yeah.
transformed to him, but I'm just curious, have you had any of those discussions, and do we have contracts
We do
Lock
have
us
a
into a
con-
price?
We do have a contract and that is gonna go up and we budgeted for
We did,
next
okay.
year.
I just don't remember having that
Yeah,
conversation.
but we can get into the details at the next BNF committee.
Perfect. Thank you.
You remember that? Yeah, thank you.
Do we want to take care of the action now
From the BNF,
from,
from this.
Yeah,
you
so,
wanna do
yeah, so,
this?
so this-
So this-
just to help new members, you vote on these numbers. And then that's what the public is essentially commenting on, for their public hearing, which is scheduled for April 13th.
April 13th.
Thank you. And then this budget is printed in the newspaper and then also, I mean, obviously, the presentations that we've had are all available on our websites.
And if we approve it tonight, it goes into the paper tomorrow, is that it?
No, March 31st.
Oh, March 31st.
And we also put on display the budget book at the library, at the district office, and at City Hall, as well as on our website.
all the line items?
And can I just following up, since we're in a public forum, so is our public hearing happening at, I mean, what is the forum of our public
Oh.
hearing?
Sure, the public hearing actually happens as part of this time a regular scheduled school committee meeting, that's very common. But it'll be posted, I think separately and so just the format is, I'll give an abbreviated version of the presentation. And then it's essentially what we think of as open communication, but it's on a specific, on this topic.
So we're not gonna be at City Hall, like, we're doing just this.
Yeah, it looks, for all intents and purposes, it looks just like this.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's advertised differently and,
Right.
you know,
And
yeah.
information spread more.
Yeah.
More thoroughly.
Someone would like to make a motion?
I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on the numbers that we're putting up.
Can you
So,
see things like me too?
so we're just voting on this, posting this, is that what the motion is, not the actual number, because we usually do.
We put the number in.
We do put the number?
Yeah.
Okay, we need to have that number. So at our BNF meeting on March 16th, we reviewed everything that you saw tonight, and there was a motion that was presented and seconded to recommend to the full committee to approve the notice of public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget for publication in the amount of $46,988,897. And I so move.
Keith second. Okay. Discussion? No questions, have confirms what we have experienced, that the process has brought everybody along in terms of details and questions have been asked and answered along the way.
Very thorough presentations.
Yeah, very.
For administration.
Maria, can we have roll call vote?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verda?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minio?
Yes. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Gary Frisch and Cody Marshall.
Absolutely. Great job.
Every couple of days or every week or so, I have a small freak out. And I talked to Gary and it's okay, we're doing fine. But that's because they have such a good eye on things and they understand budget inside and out and are great collaborators.
Excuse me, Kevin,
Yes.
do you or Ben want to just, for the public, so they know the next steps? This is for publication, public hearing, eventually comes back to the committee. I guess I'm explaining it now.
Okay.
I'll let you.
Yeah, so we are now at the point where we are required to have a public hearing on our budget. So this is our process of having our public hearing. The city council does a similar piece in June, May or June, they have their public hearing on all of their departmental budgets as well. So we're kind of ahead of them because we need to do our budget prior to submitting it over to the mayor's office. So we'll do the public hearing, we'll take input from the public. Some people show up to say, you know, keep going, you're doing great, you support the budget. Other people may say, have you thought of this, have you thought of that? So their opportunity is on April 13th to bring that feedback or those comments or questions to us. from there, we incorporate those comments into our thinking about the budget, right? We take that input. In the meantime, also, as the superintendent is looking through those other things that are on his list of future things, those decisions may flesh out to make a change into the budget. We then incorporate, and so that goes through the BNF subcommittee. And if there are changes to that budget, we make those. And then we do another vote to vote the official budget to send over to the mayor's office. And so we submit to the mayor's office. Sometimes that budget just gets blessed and sent on to city council. Sometimes the number's different. But we have made our case as to what we believe we need. And then it goes to the city council review as well. Take it off.
Just so people have an idea, so I'm gonna be beginning, I think, in the next couple of weeks, working with all the department heads in pretty intense way so I can develop what goes into the city's binder that will flow to the city council. I don't know if they publish their reviews, but they're gonna have like day-long reviews, like 8-hour sessions, so stay tuned for that. And eventually they'll call in you and Ben to talk about your budget, our budget.
And then by the end of June, we vote on a formal budget for the following fiscal year. After the city council votes, it then comes back and we vote it again so that it becomes official.
Which always ends up to be the Wednesday of Fiesta, we have Fiesta this year, so we're gonna make that a quick meeting.
But so right now it's scheduled for June 22nd.
That's the first.
That's
night
the
of
Wednesday
Fiesta,
fiesta.
that's the first night.
It's that way
From the floor.
every year.
That's usually the
Only time-
5K too, right?
Yeah,
No, that's Thursday.
Oh, that's Thursday.
Last 2 years, we haven't had Fiesta.
Yeah,
That's right.
I'll know that.
Um,
Ben might want to do that. He's a runner.
Which one,
Just
yeah,
5K.
yeah.
You can do it with Matt.
All right.
Yeah.
Matt does it every year.
Matt and I discussed running today. It's not going well for either one of us. I can rally. And I hope you can too. Wait, when's that race?
Thursday.
That's Thursday, yeah. Okay. So we can have an early meeting on the 22nd of June. All those dates are in the calendar, which I showed you. We have a budget central on the budget operations part of the website, which will be updated tomorrow with this presentation, all the work done. And then the calendar's on there, it's up to date, so.
Are these dates gonna be on the GPS calendar?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that, but we certainly could. Gary, will you help me remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the, some of the ones are sort of, firm. But yeah, we can, I think it's a good idea. Where the public hearing should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yes, should be.
entire calendar is a document you can search and find, but you're right, on the face of our calendars.
Right, because people refer to our calendar to look for what.
Okay. All right, we will move on to subcommittee reports.
Do you
And,
want to accept the superintendent's report?
oh, you want to make a motion to accept the superintendent's report?
So moved.
Great discussion. Okay, Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verda?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minio?
Yes.
All right, we will move on to subcommittee reports, and the first report is by Melissa Prince from the Building and Finance Subcommittee meetings of March 15th and March 16th.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue right now with the meeting from the 16th, which was our BNF meeting. Everything we've been discussing now, just to stay on path. And two other, I'm not going to give a report of that meeting because it was basically what we saw and discussed tonight. But out of that meeting, there was two additional motions, I believe. So I'm just gonna, they're pretty
I
self-explanatory.
can also show those on the screen.
Okay, that would be great. So the
While
first
you're
one is the resource officer.
Yep. we get that.
So as Ben's putting that up there, as you know, we have a resource officer at the high school and one at O'Malley, and we do a cost share with the city. So it was motioned and second to recommend to the full committee to authorize the CFO to request a special budgetary transfer of $60,000 to the Gloucester Police Department for funding of the Gloucester High School Resource Officer for fiscal year 2022. And I so move.
Second.
So are there any questions?
So this is just a, it might help.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a transfer, and has been happening since I think 2014.
Yes.
2014, where our budget, we reimburse the city for two things, and you're talking about both of them tonight. One of them is the second resource officer. So the city pays a salary, then we reimburse the city for that cost. Okay, and that's what this motion is, and then I'll talk about the second one.
And I just want a little bit of clarification, because I think it's the O'Malley resource officer, right?
It's-
So I
yeah.
don't know that we should say the word Gloucester High School resource officer, because I think it's the second one was the O'Malley one.
It's the other.
So I just don't want to link it to one and it be the other.
Correct.
So I guess I would just amend the motion to remove GHS.
Yeah, you can just say, you can just say school resource officer.
Yeah, school resource officer, exactly.
The BNF packet said it was GHS, the GHS school resource officer, so that's why I put it in there. But
Yeah,
if you
no,
wanna
I
take it
understand
out-
that, yeah, but I just wanted to make sure as this goes forward from all of us, that we correct that, just to remove GHS so that it doesn't cause any confusion in case it, which is what I think, which is O'Malley resource officer. So I guess I have to do a motion to amend, the motion to remove GHS. An amendment, so is there a second? I'll
Second. Okay, shall we vote on the amendment? Any discussion on the amendment? Yeah. Okay, Maria?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verda?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Reese?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minnie?
Yes.
Okay, so now we have the motion. Any discussion on that? No. Okay, Maria?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verda?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Reese?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minio?
Yes.
So the other motion, as Ben just announced too, it was motion and second by the BNF committee to recommend to the full committee to authorize the CFO to request a special budgetary transfer of $420,452 for the out-of-district tuition expenses to be paid through the school choice program. And I so move.
Second.
Discussion?
And I just want to add that this, like Ben said, this is an annual reimbursement to the city. It happens every year, so it's not anything new. The money goes to the cherry sheet, I believe.
Right,
It's on the
and,
cherry sheet.
and what this is that, so we have students who, from other districts, or, I'm sorry, students who are Gloucester residents, they choose to go to, other districts, location choice out of Gloucester to a neighboring district, neighboring public school district. During their time there, they are evaluated, as a special education student and then need to go out of district to a private or public placement outside that district, special education placement. So it's like, you talk about our out of district tuition students, it's the same thing, but they are going from that, that neighboring district they've choiced into, okay? The city gets charged for that and then reimburse the city for those costs, and those costs are up here. You can see for the last 4 years, and the different schools or public school districts that were essentially paying tuition to. This amounts to 7 students across these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 districts or organizations that are involved in this point.
And as we discussed this motion, the frustration that we've had for many years was discussed, and I think Bill brought it up, that we don't have a decision in these expenses. This is students that go to other districts, and those districts are making the decisions for their, the programs that those kids are going into, and then they just bill Gloucester. So until the law changes, which I know there was some discussion of it a few years back with Q-Star, it still remains the same. So we're obligated for these expenses for a good cause.
I'm just curious, because I haven't seen this name before. What is the SEEM Collaborative?
It's like the North Shore Consortium, just in a different location with some different types of programming.
Okay, just interesting.
It's one of the regional collaboratives that provide a variety of different services, including special education services to local districts.
All right, no more questions. May we have a vote, please?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verga?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minnie?
Yes.
And that was it for that meeting on the 16th. So I'm gonna go back to the Building and Finance Subcommittee of March 15th, where we discussed the building use policy, procedures, and costs. I sent you all an email, but I'm gonna highlight through it just for the sake of the public knowing what we did at that meeting. So at our meeting, which was attended by myself, Kathy, and Ben through Zoom, because they were going to the great hockey game, Bill and I stood behind to keep the conversation going. We met with Mark Cole, who is the Assistant Director of Budget and Administration from the Department of Public Works, to discuss the policies and the procedures. And we learned a lot. It was a good conversation, very informative. First, we learned from Maria that we have these books of all the rentals that we've done for the past couple of years, which is a great resource. As you know, the past 2 years with COVID, we probably haven't rented our facilities as much. But we do have those documents to review and get an idea for discussions going forward of what our actual building use used to look like, and it will probably look like hopefully coming back this year. The first topic we discussed was the finances and how it worked. And it was no surprise to learn that the account that collects the building fees is on the city side. It's not the school side. And I believe the city auditor, Kenny Costa, manages that account. The schools receive no money from building rentals. The money is deposited into that account, and that account then funds costs for like utilities, repairs, maintenance, custodial fees, and supplies. So just to be clear, the schools do not benefit from any rentals other than the joy and the pleasure of being able to give back to our community by using our buildings. The biggest expense for the building use is our custodian fees, and we have their contract and know what those salaries are as they go up each year. We had a conversation about utilities, the cost of heat, and other lighting and stuff like that. And because I was curious to know if those costs were figured into what we charge, and we learned that they're not. Mark Cole did say he's gonna look into some industry standards to find out, in case that is gonna be part of our conversation going forward. When we talk about costs, we learned that the heat during the cold weather months is turned down on the weekends, so we're not heating our buildings consistently through the winter. West Parish, I think, is the one school that is on a system because it's a newer school, and I'm sure our new school will be the same when we have veterans East Gloucester School. But the custodians usually turn the heat down on Fridays and then go in on Monday morning early and turn the heat back up. I asked about shoveling and snow conditions, wondering if during storms, if there's rentals, do we have to pay extra for the custodians to come out and shovel at a time when they normally wouldn't? And we learned that the city gets charged for the removal of snow by the inch of each storm. So it really doesn't matter how many times they shovel because they would be doing the work anyway. So for anyone renting the property, it was learned that we do not have any expenses that are related to snowing and shoveling and plowing. Because as you know, the custodians are responsible for doing the work of shoveling the pathways. We also learned that our rental fees are pretty much outdated. We looked at, or Gary did some work looking at about five different districts, and I pulled out some districts as well. And our costs are just not really comparable to other school districts, either in our dark communities, because we look there, and also our surrounding school districts. So we need to look at that. We also learned that costs for wear and tear are not considered when we rent space. In regard to the custodians, as you know, we can't rent buildings without having a custodian in the building, so that's a requirement. Some schools, like this school that we're in now, do have custodians working during the night. So if there was a rental here, the custodians are already here, so there's not an extra charge for that. There are no set regulations or standards or processes in place to determine how many custodians are required for a rental. So in other words, if there was 500 people, there's nothing that indicates right now how many custodians would be needed for that amount of people. Is it one, is it two? Do they look at what type of function is? Those type of conversations have not happened, so there's nothing in place at this time. Custodians are not required to work on weekends. If they do work, they get time and a half on Saturdays and double time on Sundays and holidays. Our custodians are not staffed on the weekends, so we have to, when we look at our costs, we have to take that into consideration. When we tell the renter that they have to pay for custodians, we have to be sure that we inform them that the costs are higher on the weekends. The DPW made it clear that the custodians are not responsible for supervising our rented spaces. They're not babysitters. They're there in the building to set up, clean up, and if anybody needs anything during those rentals, sorry, I feel like that's too.
That's okay.
That they're there to address the needs of that group. When there is a rental, the way the process works is the DPW puts out some sort of announcement. I don't know how they do it, maybe through email, that there's a job available. And then it becomes like a bid. Custodians can react to if they want to work, let them know, let whoever's managing the rental know. The head custodians get a first priority and it goes by seniority. So therefore, the most expensive custodians get the first bite of the apple per se when rentals are available. If for some reason nobody puts in for the job, there is a mechanism to put some pressure, as I would put it, on the least seniority custodian to come into the building, even though they're technically not required to work. A supervisor to a custodian is always available. In other words, if you have a junior custodian, there's someone available by phone in case that custodian has a question. So they wouldn't necessarily be in the building, but there's always availability to discuss an issue if needed. We learned that the summer days are the busiest for our custodians. As they maintain, repair, and prepare our schools for the opening in September. I was talking to them tonight before I came in here, and they were telling me how they strip the floors, they have to remove the furniture out of all the rooms, but that is their busiest time working in the schools as opposed to during the school year. In regard to rental applications, we learned that the school district has never had really a long-term rental. The only one I can think of is our after-school program by the YMCA that we've been doing for the past couple of years. I know that used to be our program and we weren't able to manage it, so we brought in the YMCA to help us. So that's probably the most consistent, longest term rental that we have in our classes, in our schools. Classrooms are not typically rented. I think Maria, who is the building use coordinator, we gave her a new title because she's involved in all these rentals. So just so you know, you can add that to her job description and her salary over there. She did recall a long time ago, there was a classroom that was rented for a computer class for one day. But other than that, there doesn't appear to be a history at this time for renting our classrooms. And that's something I want to dig into when I look at these books that we have stashed away for the past years. Just trying to cruise through this. Classrooms are being utilized by staff over the summer. We do have summer school. We learned tonight that the Gloucester Ed Foundation has programs in our schools during the summer. So our classrooms are used for student-based interest over the summer. The DPW, and Mark Cole did state that it would be easier for the DPW staff not to have summer rentals, which in turn would allow their staff full access to the buildings to prepare for school openings in the fall. So not only are they doing cleaning, but if there's any repairs that needs to be done to the building, if they have to repair HVAC or a floor or whatever, they do it over the summertime. So they would like to be able to have free access to the building, of course, while they're managing around our summer school programs, which is pretty active. We got into a conversation about quotas and it learned that we do not at this time have quotas for capacity of each room. Like in other words, how many students can fit into the West Parish auditorium? We don't know that answer. Parking spaces, I asked Mark Cole if he could get us some information on parking spaces, and I'll give an example. Plum Cove only has 25 spaces, Beaman has 38 spaces, O'Malley obviously has a lot more, 400, high school has a lot more, West Parish has 77. So that's something to think about when we say we're gonna allow a rental for a large group, okay, where are they parking? Even though there's spaces designated lines. Of course, we know there's ways to make other spaces. However, there is a concern for grass getting ruined. We don't want neighbors complaining. We don't want driveways blocked, things like that. So we'll be talking about quotas, and we can get a lot of that information from the fire department as we make those decisions so that we know we do have the capacity when we say, yes, we're gonna rent. Rentals that include playgrounds use are approved by the school. However, rentals that use the field are not approved by the school and approved by the DPW only. As far as the procedure, we learned the principal of each school is the first person to sign off on the rental request. It's unclear what that actual process is, but I'm sure we'll learn more as we have these conversations. Maria informed us that the school secretary emails the approved documents to her. She checks the calendar, and then there's a conversation with Gary. And then that process starts talking with the DPW. Mark Cole made it clear that the DPW is not an approver of the rental request. It is on the school side. So we're actually the decision maker, and then we tell them that it's approved, and then they try to figure out how to get a custodian, if they can get a custodian, and so forth. It was reported that there's minimal discussions, upfront discussions, that we hope we can improve that communication in the process going forward. Unlike other communities, at this time, the school committee is not involved in any decision-making with rentals. However, we've learned through many other policies that school committee does make decisions on some types of rentals. Usually those rentals involve non-community based rentals, longer-term rentals. Some communities have a group that forms that involves like the superintendent, the DPW director, another city person that get together to discuss and approve long-term rentals so that all the department heads are talking to each other and they make a decision going forward. And then in other districts, the school committee gets involved in that level once all the dynamics have been worked out. So we are going to have another meeting on April 11th. We confirmed that today. It's a Monday. Ben did a good job on giving us a list of topics to discuss when we go into that meeting, to discuss the application, an application fee like they have in some districts, the actual process, how that will work from beginning to end to start from request to final approval, the priority of uses. We're going to talk about things like having liability insurance. I don't know that we do that now.
It's recommended, not required.
Recommended, required.
It's recommended now, it's not required.
It's not required.
In some places, some districts require.
Yeah, and I can tell you from being on the licensing board, we require liability insurance for all events, which is very easy to get. It's not something you sound like when you tell someone they have to go get liability insurance at first, they like, how do I do that? You know, it's a very simple process. And that way we would have insurance coverage for any damage or issues that happen so that the city's not liable for the costs, neither is the individual.
I'm surprised about the liability. There's a
I know.
checkbox on the
I
form.
know, there's a lot of things to be surprised about.
There's a checkbox on the form, so one would assume.
Mhm.
So we're saying because it's not spelled out on the policy, yet it's on the form, it's not a requirement? I
So
think that's a pretty great
I
area.
would say that the process, and this is just from where we're at right now, being new, is it needs to be developed more, and it
Yes.
needs more attention, right? So we learned a lot from this conversation, a lot.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have a good discussion, and there's lots of room for improvement, right? But knowing that we haven't had a lot of rentals, this really hasn't triggered
No, yeah,
this
I
type of
can-
thing, but now it has,
I
right?
agree. I mean, it was like 20 years ago, we did a policy, and now here we are 20 years later, with there, it's obvious, maybe omissions or things that
Yeah.
weren't clear, that it's time to review. One thing I would ask you to
Yeah.
think part of the discussion is, because we've had a lot of experience with snow in the last few weeks,
With what?
with snow.
So,
So, because typically, like, we've been lucky that it's been snowed like on a Friday, so we have the whole weekend to clear.
yeah.
But if somebody's got something booked for a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday,
I guess it
there's
is.
gonna be some disclaimers that say, you know, the DPW is not gonna rush to get there first.
Yep.
You know, to make, so we're gonna have these outs that are in there.
I would say that there's a couple disclaimers that have to go on there
Yeah,
that we need to discuss, and not only that, but who's gonna tell who, when things happen, you know, so there's a lot of mechanics that need to be worked out, and we really haven't had a reason to review this, because a majority, I would say, from what I've heard from Maria, and just being here for the past years, is a majority of our rentals are like PTO.
Yeah.
Sports groups, the Little League, you know, or Bill Melvin's involved with one, the what is the one of the sports teams?
Travel basketball.
Travel basketball. So the rentals that we've been doing, majority of them are student-based, you know, even if it's not a Gloucester school program, they're still student-based.
Yeah.
They're community-based, and it's either a one-day rental or it's a one-season rental that happens regularly, you know, that happens in most schools, right? So now we're getting interest from other groups, which is forcing us to like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here, you know? So this is gonna be an in-depth look at what our policy is it best practice? And we have plenty of policies to look at, you know, are the costs current? I'm gonna say no. Are all our concerns addressed? I would say no. You know, you want the liability insurance, you want to make sure that there's good communication between the DPW and the school before the approval is made to say, yes, there is a custodian available, not, okay, we're approving it, find a custodian, you know, so those conversations, upfront conversations, I think should be worked into what we're doing. The fact that the schools get nothing for the rentals and the money goes on the city side, which is okay, because you're paying, you're fixing repairs and things like that. You know, where is the priority in the rentals? You know, if you have two groups that want to use the new school gym at the same time, we're gonna have this beautiful basketball court, right? So if you have two groups that want it at the same time, how are we gonna prioritize that? Our policy doesn't address that. Many other districts do tiers. In other words, if you're a community member, if you're a student-based member, if you're a school access, you get first priority. You know, those are the kind of things we have to work out so that we don't get ourselves into a jam going forward. We are building beautiful schools, we're maintaining beautiful schools, we have labs, we have vocational programs. There's gonna be interest in using that space. The question is, how do we make sure that it stays safe, that the people are safe, you know, the school is safe, the school community is safe from that, you know, do you need security guards? We don't have that conversation here, they do in Cambridge, you know, so there's just, I don't wanna take up all the time here, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I would suggest, knowing that we're meeting on April 11th, if anyone does have anything they want discussed by our group, to either email me or Bill or Kathy, and we can incorporate those conversations into our conversations, so that when we come back here to this group with recommendations, it'll address the concerns you have as opposed to dealing with them afterwards. Because I think there's a lot of work to be done here. I think we're eager to do the work, get it done, get a great policy procedure and costs out there, have a good relationship between DPW and the schools, and come out in a good way. You know, we know what our responsibilities are to whoever requests a rental. Like, we can't refuse a rental based on who they are, because that seems to be the topic of the conversation lately through the emails that we're getting. So we know where we stand legally with that, but how we do rentals clearly needs to be addressed for all parties, DPW, the renter, the schools, the school committee. Feel secure that we're doing the right thing by opening our doors to the public, knowing we're getting nothing for doing it. And I just can't express that nothing, because I was just surprised by it, you know. It just makes you look at what is the benefits here. You know, so it's the feeling good of knowing taxpayers of Gloucester are paying for our buildings. How do we keep them in a good way, but share what we have at the same time with our community?
When we originally adopted it, the school department got the money because, as you know, because you're on the school committee, when
Custodians,
you flipped it to the city side. But yeah, so 20 years, it's time for a page one rewrite.
Yeah. And I do have some, I don't need to bring it up tonight, but there's gonna be some legal questions that come up out of that too. And I would just hope that through our discussion, we can, through Ben or whatever, reach out to Naomi and Greg and just get some legal questions asked too, as we come forward with a more robust policy that has good language in it, that can try to have the foreseeable future to know all the issues that could come at us. Like I said, especially knowing that we're gonna have new school buildings, and West Parish is beautiful. This new school, I ride by it every day, is gonna be gorgeous. You know, people are hearing about great things, labs that are going on at O'Malley here, the vocational program, we have a grant for that tonight, which is like a build and rental. there's gonna be people in our schools, we just gotta make sure that we do it right. So, and that will end my report. Stop it for tonight.
Okay. Next, we have program subcommittee, Laura Wiesen.
Yes. There we go. So we met on March 17th for our second meeting with Attendance Works. So in attendance was our program subcommittee, Greg, Amy Can, and our two Ursula Attendance Works researchers and helpers. So this meeting was really for them to get us up to date on the new DESE guidelines related to attendance, and then start to give us their recommendations. So there's a lot there. I will go through, I know this was sent to everyone, but I want public to know about this. Again, we started with the fact that chronic absence is 10%, missing 10% of your days of school. So 18 days for any reason. And this is critical because throughout these recommendations, there is this is not truancy. This is excused absences are counted as part of chronic absenteeism. And you'll see throughout these recommendations that there's really a move both by DESE and recommended by Attendance Works to move away from punitive punishment for missing school and how to engage and bring students and families back into the school. So I'll just go through. The first recommendation was to utilize DESE reporting guidance to define presence and absence. So that's just how much school you have to be present for that to be counted as a day. Secondly is to use the definition for chronic absence, which is 18 school days, 10% of the school days. Recommendation 3, they described a tiered system of supports and interventions for attendance, similar to what we do for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for academic work. So that's starting with a foundational whole school support and then sort of, following up as students miss school. Recommendation 4 was to revise the absentee notification process to support early intervention and personalized outreach. So this is complicated. This is about students and families really being contacted by a person, right? Not a robocall, early in the process and start building relationships around this. And all of this is more complicated. And you'll tell me, Greg, if I'm missing some major thing, but this is very much a summary. This whole process is about engaging and creating relationships. So this is a place for that. And part of this is letting families know that even excused absences count. And not only do they count, there's data that shows that the more school you miss, the worse your outcomes are. And that's part of how we're gonna, how they want to share this information with families. Recommendation number 5 is including the roles and responsibilities of district and school level teams. So again, having sort of organized teams in the schools who are based on attendance, not just sort of one person whose job is attendance. Recommendation number 6, de-emphasize punitive sanctions for truancy. And again, this is the theme of much of this, is how to engage and encourage kids to go to school and not to sort of lead to a punishment and a sense of hopelessness around school. Recommendation 7, which requires a lot more conversation at our next meeting, is eliminating the attendance failure policy. So currently at GHS, if you miss a certain number of days, you fail that class regardless of what your schoolwork says. And I felt Attendance Works makes a very powerful case as to why that doesn't lead kids to re-engage, but instead to just drop out. Recommendation 8 was to adopt DESE dropout guidance. And among other things that I thought was really interesting was that to really have an exit interview with students, really understand what's happening for them and to try, and the goal is really to try to re-engage or to offer other paths and not just to like remove kids from the system when they decide to drop out. I know that's simplifying, but
No, it's a great summary. I just want to point out on number 7 that over the last year and a half, to almost 2 years, the attendance failure has been modified for COVID. And so students are not, that's not applicable during the pandemic, but it was prior, and the discussion about whether it will continue.
so
Can I just, something that I would like to know more about is, we as a district, and I think sort of as a culture, are sort of moving towards staying home more when we are sick, right? And so that doesn't mean that we're necessarily in a pandemic, but I think parents are keeping kids home for things that they might not necessarily kept them home for in the past. And so, how does that sort of translate as we sort of move forward post-pandemic? I mean, I know my daughter missed 5 days of school because of a cough, because I don't want to send her to school with a cough. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think
I think it's very important to keep in mind that it takes a lot of days to get to chronic, which is 18 in a year.
Yeah.
So if you are going to be exercising that caution as a parent, which is totally understandable, I think the message is that you can't also take days to go to Disney World. You can't take days to go here or there. Like something has to give. You can't do it all.
Sure.
But 18 is a lot of days, and we have a lot of students who miss more than 18 days. So that, in my opinion, goes far beyond missing 5 to 8 days a year for health reasons, which we might not have done previously.
Sure.
But there's a pretty big allowance for those kinds of things, and we're far exceeding any kind of reasonable cautionary health attendance.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So I remember having this conversation when we created this policy years ago, because I remember being frustrated by the whole thing. Mass General Laws states that kids can miss 7 days in a 6-month period. So that probably amounts to about 10 days for a school year. Otherwise, there's consequences. I believe there's like a $25 fine. But my question is, so is attendance work suggesting that we go with 18 days? And if, because that's what I'm hearing, that 18 days, and if so, how does that work with the child requiring assistance truancy regulations that are there as well, where you have to report to the court if a child is truant, missing so many days, what guidelines are they gonna go by? So not that I'm against, I'm in favor of hearing about this non-punishment. That's where I wanna go. That's where I wanted to go years ago. But I'm just wondering, how does that conflict with the laws and requirements that we currently have? Was that discussed or not yet?
well, I mean, DESE just came out with new guidance. So like this is March 2022 guidance that they're now. My sense was that their new guidance really meshed with Attendance Works research and the data. I mean, I don't know, but they're presenting stuff to us that's from that. I'm looking at some of this where they are talking about Massachusetts law and requirements, but I don't know about this 7-day.
Do they
Yeah,
want to
just,
change it or?
No, I think it's important to understand that it will be in compliance with all legal requirements. The chronic absenteeism, it's really important to understand that there's no Mass General law around chronic absenteeism per se. That's DESE. DESE calculates the impact of absenteeism and uses chronic absenteeism as an accountability standard. So we are measured by our levels of chronic absenteeism, which is the 10% of the school year. And we also, I've shared this before, but that chronic absenteeism, of course, has I think, a pretty strong impact on performance as well. So it's a double hit. So if somebody's out a lot, they might have lower scores. And then we also get dinged for the actual absenteeism rate itself. So the chronic absenteeism is unrelated to Mass General Law and those days. Those don't disappear. We still have to provide the notice. We still have to do the appropriate CRAs. But what we're talking about is really identifying the impact of the number of days missed. And I believe that Mass General Law, unless I'm mistaken, there's about, has a language around consecutive days too, I think. Not sure it's a total like that, you may be right, but we're really focusing on the impact of the chronic absenteeism.
First of all, did you get through your talking? You got some more talking points?
Most of it. I mean, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just was thinking that I saw it as, when we discuss chronic absenteeism, I almost saw it as, this is the definition, this is kind of how we're defining it. And saying, well, there's no laws around that, but here's the number, and that's the target. Anything above that, you're in trouble, so. And the other thing that I think is important to remember is that we talked about a little bit was the messaging, the messaging coming from schools and from the community about absenteeism, I thought was really important. And also just the data behind that. And can we, I know what it was, taking baby steps with this process. It's such a large problem, not only in Boston, but nationwide, that we don't need to hit 10 targets up in the sky right off the bat. If we hit one target over the next couple of years, the next year, whether that be looking at it at the kindergarten level or whatever we decide is the right way to go about that, then that's at least a step in the right direction, I think. I think the problem is people get like all worked up about it. Oh, this is huge. How are we going to tackle this? Well, if we take it just a small step at a time, I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
I thank you for mentioning that. One, for the great overview, but also that key point, because I think I shared the other night that it feels overwhelming to me until I think about where can we concentrate our efforts in a group that is going to have a lot of change, make a lot of change. And I think kindergarten, I think that's the spot, because early habits are often lasting habits, and those are habits that our students need to demonstrate, but also those are habits that our families need to learn and practice. And I think that just goes together and carry them well throughout their years. So I would love to see us concentrate on manageable and also phase in. We want to get here in 5 years. We're starting with these changes. Too many changes to the system is also going to be pretty tough.
So the last thing, this is just relevant to the top, just because we don't have a next meeting scheduled. I saw your email. So it looks like it won't be till May, right? Because that's last week in April that we tried to do it. So we do have a little bit of a time crunch.
Yep.
Because the goal is to have a meeting, adopt policy, or vote on policy, and then of course bring policy here. And anyway, so just to identify, there's a little bit of a time crunch.
So I'm curious, and tonight might not be the night, but to hear how, of course, I can't tell how happy I am to hear this conversation, because I remember how frustrated I was when we were talking about the punishment before. I mean, in the years we've been on the committee, we talked about I hate even bringing this up, but the punishment of kids not paying for their lunch and eating a different lunch, and how we've morphed into a much better system that is not punishable. And this attendance, I think, is another one where we have a lot of work to do, because we were talking about, kids can't play sports, they can't do this, they can't do that if they're not attending school. And while I can understand that you want to hold somebody accountable and set that bar, at the same time, for the kid that is not coming to school, I've learned personally that they're not engaged and they don't feel a reason to come to school. So how do we get them here? And punishing them only confirms them staying home. You can't get them to school if they're gonna be punished for it. But at the same time, you gotta hold them accountable. But I'm very interested to hear on how we can morph into a system that makes the kids want to come back. So, okay, we recognize that you've been out 4 days because no matter how hard your mother tries, you're not going to school. But what is the school doing to say, come back here? Let me help you come back, as opposed to saying, well, when you come back, you're not playing your basketball and you're not going to recess or whatever they do for punishment. So I can't wait to see that sort of transition, because I learned from experience that I think that's going to make a huge difference, especially at the O'Malley school level and the high school level.
There's talk about recommending specific employees of the school system, be it like a close teacher to the individual student, or even like a janitor, or maybe a coach or something, someone with a personal connection, to try to bridge that gap and maybe even make a home visit. So that was one of the suggestions there. I think, rather than doing a punitive thing, try to do an outreach and connection kind of thing.
So I listened in on the meeting and I found the whole direction, the whole approach from the consultants and everything. I mean, I know our attendance policy, when we were discussing it the last time, was rooted in the fact that kids need to be in school to learn, right? We want kids in school. We want them to know it's important to be there to learn. Unfortunately, our policy did not necessarily, well, it wasn't all about the positive things. I do think the messaging to families about being tardy and about being absent, at least at the elementary school, was very much, your kids need to be here to learn. But in terms of the supports to draw them back in was not necessarily, in place, and is probably not in place very much right now. So, and I know with the current policy, it's excused versus unexcused, and people are freaked about one versus the other. And I like that this focuses totally on presence, not on why you were out. I know years ago, we talked about families missing MCAS because they were on vacation, right? And we're like, oh my God, they took a second vacation this year and it kills the attendance. No, we want to talk about being present to learn. So I think even that's probably why it's an accountability thing from DESE, is they want to know that our schools are engaging and that our kids are supported. And one of those pieces of evidence is how many kids, have regular good attendance. So I'm excited about
There's a
the
lot.
whole
It's super-
reframing of this.
So are we worried about the timing of the policy to get into the handbooks and stuff like that?
Well, Greg, again, correct me, but my understanding is you want to start training people and like get in the handbooks and start training, staff to enact whatever our policy is. from the beginning.
I think we need to be mindful that we are still in a pandemic, and that we can't just plan on turning the switch and doing everything next year. So I think, first of all, there's the lateness and the policy piece, but that's about getting them into the handbooks. It is unlikely that this is going to be ready by the time the handbooks come up for approval, and it may be something that has to be looked at a later meeting as a single item. Since we don't go to printing press anymore for handbooks, that's something that is more doable to add in during the summer.
And in the
But
meantime, we're still in COVID relaxing mode still, because they haven't declared the pandemic
Right.
over.
Right. I didn't know that COVID was relaxing. Nothing but very relaxing to me. I'm kidding.
But there are some pieces that we are going to want to identify to put in place, and I see one of those that is very actionable is starting with incoming kindergarten parents and students, because that doesn't get as tangled up in the course credit failure, attendance failure. I mean, there are things that we can do without getting caught up in some of the heavier duty pieces that are at the higher grades. So we can get started.
But what's happening this year? Like, so we have that failing a class if you miss so much at the high school. Is that happening now? Or are we laxed in the way we're
No,
counting attendance?
that's been relaxed.
Okay.
Yeah. And the only other thing I want to point out is the connecting to students, the positive supports, those kinds of things are happening in all of our schools with a lot of our staff. And so I don't want to give the impression that we are not doing a lot of the things. What we have not done is we haven't outlined it as policy. We haven't been intentional about saying, this is what we're going to do all the time. We want you to know it, and we want to have it be on the sort of front page. And we still do that, a lot of this work. So a lot of it is about putting it on paper and living by it all the time. But there's a lot of great work happening for sure.
And all the time with every student.
All the time with every student.
Because it's every student and every family, And that's when we have chronic absence rates at this level. It isn't every student. And it needs, and people need to know, everybody needs to know that the types of connections that students benefit from, all students benefit from those connections. And we have to make a concerted effort to make sure that every student can find a real connection to the school, so they have a reason to come every day. And right now, it's fair to say, again, it's trying to be honest, not negative. That isn't happening for every student. We understand it. So we're, with your support, make a real effort to make sure that everybody knows that. We have to.
And through our budget. It's huge.
I will say, I'm thrilled by the K bus that has the Everyday Matters big on the side. And I think the more, I know we've talked that school being valuable and what the community really values for our kids, the more it's a community message, it'd be kind of cool to have across Rogers Street, for a month in September. So things like that, because I know you can get approval to put one of those big banners by the St. Peter Square. But those are ways to kind of elevate the messaging, like, we're excited, please, our schools are good, please come to school, we want you at school.
And we have a great opportunity now because I think everyone missed, for all of us who, when there wasn't school, I think the importance of school became that much more obvious for everything, for relationships and for socializing and for, just all of that. I think we're at this moment where people really know that deeply in a way that they didn't when we were all in school every day.
Guys, but just as we're sort of thinking of like how to spread the message, and I know that conversation will continue, but thinking about starting in kindergarten, right? Like sometimes I think our best messengers are our students, right? And so if we have our students sort of talk to or do a video to our kindergartners saying like, this is what happens when you miss school, this is what you'll miss. I know my daughter misses school, she's like, I'm gonna miss this, and then I'm gonna miss this, and then I'm gonna miss this. There's like a list of things that she's gonna miss. And so that would be really powerful, I think, is to have our students really stand up and say like, it's fun to be here and, come to school, because if you don't, you'll miss all these wonderful things. So.
See Matt Fusco videos.
Yeah, 100%. All the videos.
All that, the
We're starting working on
all
elementary
of
school
it.
video
Yeah.
in 1623,
I
so.
see a sign
But
on the
just-
car.
On all of our cars.
On City Hall.
Excellent report, excellent work, very important work.
Yeah.
And Greg, thank you for tackling this. I know it's been
And thank you to Amy Cam, who's out
Yes.
there, I think, listening in. Might be.
okay. All right, we have to continue. The next item, so we've dealt with 3 of the action items. So the next is acceptance of grants, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Department of Elementary and Secondary Education grants. They all seem to be adjustments.
They're minor adjustments.
Minor adjustments. So without objection, do we want to have a motion to take these all together? Yes. Okay, someone want to make the motion to accept the grants? Second. Okay. And we all have them in our packet. The public can see them in our agenda. So Maria, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verda?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yeah.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minio?
Yes.
And the next grant is the Essex County Community Foundation grant to Gloucester High School in the amount of $61,217.91.
So moved. Second.
Someone wants to probably give a little more detail on that.
Sure, this is the second year, right, of the event of us working with the North Shore Workforce Development and support of Essex Community to do workforce training on advanced manufacturing with adults during the summertime. It's a big success last year. It's something that's supported by Mass Hire. It's also been supported by the Mayor's Office both last year and this year. I think went very well last year. One apropos to tonight's conversation, I checked in with Principal Cook today, and this is being done. It's done during the summertime from June until August, done during the regular hours of the building when their custodians on already here and on working. So we're not hiring any of the folks, but there will be staffing here and that sort of thing. They use the advanced manufacturing facility and then the classroom that's joining it. And that's all the space they use. We're really pleased to be able to partner with organizations, support adults in training or retraining them, and then by doing that, be a good community member as well.
I don't really remember, but I can only assume that was updated with a $500,000 grant not that long ago, that whole facility. So I would assume that grant probably had a little eye towards adult education and maximizing that equipment.
I assume I wasn't aware, but it would certainly make a lot of sense, and that was could not have been done without the support.
Okay, any questions? No questions? No? Okay, Maria, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verda?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minio?
Yes.
The next item of action is approval to continue inter-district school choice policy file JFBB. Just prefaces every year, if you choose not to accept students from other districts, you have to vote to do so. Absent a vote, it's assumed that you are accepting kids, but we have historically made it very clear that we take the vote, that we participate in inter-district school choice. So
Which has to be done by March 31st.
I think it's March 31st, according to that. So do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any questions?
Not a question, but for the people out there who may have a question, we don't have a choice to not let our students go.
We do not.
Just so, I remember, I go through this many times over the years, but just so people out there, if they're wondering,
We would love to have every Gloucester child come to Gloucester schools.
but everything we talked about today is to make that an easier task. Right.
Exactly, correct.
That is one of our primary goals. But there are, as you said, this is to allow us to accept students in the district.
And we would love to have other students come, particularly when we have our vocational programs that other schools don't have. We have fabulous programs all throughout the schools.
Yeah, robotics, engineering, even high school, great programs, absolutely.
And we have a roll call vote.
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verda?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. The last item of business is approval of the nurses' contract effective September 1st, 2021 to August 31st, 2024. I'll turn it over to Sam Watson.
So in your packet, you'll see the tentative agreement between Massachusetts Nurses Association and the Gloucester School Committee. We met on March 14th. And per our executive session and the guidance from the full committee, we stood firm on our final offer and we were successful in coming to an agreement. So without, does anybody have any questions on what's in the packet? Is everyone comfortable with moving forward with a motion tonight?
I have a good question, maybe it's a simple answer, I'm hoping it is, but with these, what were those days, the personal days, I think there were, the two that were added on, right? If they don't use them, they get paid from them anyway, so essentially they're getting paid twice. For like, say, like, you know, they never took a day off, but they worked, they got paid, plus they get paid. Am I understanding that right? Like, you know what I mean, like, they never took the day off.
Sure.
You know
So,
what I mean?
so we've, in other units, we've given extra personal days, right? And there was a request.
I remember all that.
So I guess I want to preface this first, because if it's something that you're not going to agree with, we need to schedule an executive session. We kind of did this approval a little bit
Yeah.
different.
I'm just.
So are you just curious
Yeah.
about how it would work as opposed to opposing it? Because we
Yeah,
need to be clear on
just
that.
clarification,
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
like, is that what's happening?
Yeah, so a lot of times we get, if you don't mind, I don't wanna step on you. A lot of times we get proposals in this situation we did, they wanted more personal days every year. Most groups have 3, we have one group that works year round, that gets 4.
Yeah, I remember that.
So when they ask for more, we have to consider that, right? So in this situation, knowing that nurses worked extremely hard, nurses, we did not have substitutes, so if they wanted to take a day off, most of them came to work anyway because there wasn't a substitute to fill in from them, right? So they were exhausted, they are working to capacity, they probably didn't take a lot of their time off that they're entitled to, or some of the time they're entitled to, because they just couldn't, because there's no one to fill in, and they're very responsible and obligated to their responsibilities, so they just didn't. So recognizing all that, we gave them the ability for this year only, knowing they didn't get to take the time. They did ask for more personal time, but this was kind of a way of recognizing their hard work, that they were dedicated to their responsibilities. So 2 of the days off, yes, they're gonna get financing for that, if
Yeah,
it's
okay.
because they can't take the time off.
Right, more or less, like, kind of a backdoor bonus.
I don't know that I would use that word backdoor,
I mean.
but yeah.
Yeah, all right,
I mean, that's what we decided to give them this year. I mean, each group, we do something a little bit different in each group because we can't treat everybody the same way because their job responsibilities are different, their working conditions are different, their responsibilities are different. So in this negotiation rounds, we knew that this year was a tough one. The teachers were very successful in getting some ask from their group, and this was something that was important to them to get more personal time. So that's what we
okay,
decided.
yeah, just wanna get some questions.
Yeah.
You're also welcome to take time off too.
Right,
Right.
which is
Provided
really what they
there's a
want to do.
substitute, I think I heard.
Yeah, and we do
And
have.
we do have it now.
We do
Oh,
have one
yeah,
right now
yeah, I think
this
that's
year.
awesome.
We
Yeah.
don't know that we'll have it next year,
Right,
but we know we have it right now. So that's why, one of the reasons why I agreed to this year only.
yeah,
Trust me, they want to be on a beach somewhere or a day off as opposed to in school and short.
Yeah.
It's well deserved. But that's not for next year, it's just this year only. And I think Sam's gonna read into the.
Yeah, when we,
Yeah.
after the motion, I'll read the whole. So do we have a motion to accept?
Second.
To approve. Yeah,
To approve it.
to approve the nurses' contract.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Jumped on it.
Or should I, I'm just gonna say the dates though. For, to be in effect September 1st, 2021 to August 31st, 2024.
Ms. Prince?
Yes,
wait.
I thought you were gonna read the,
You're gonna read
the,
the terms.
the terms of.
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
Discussion.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I take that back. Not changing my mind.
You what?
I just talking about it.
Oh,
I said yes already, so I said.
okay, so the compensation proposal, so FY '22, there'll be an increase of 2.25%, and we're gonna add step 13 at 2% for both BA and MA levels. FY '23, an increase of 2.25%. We'll drop the first step for both BA and MA levels and add 1% to step 13 for both BA and MA, and then FY '24 is a 2.5% increase, drop the first step for both BA and MA, and add 1% to step 13, resulting in a top step increase of 4%, step 12 for both BA and MA. So the personal days for FY '22, nurses would be entitled to 2 additional personal days. If a nurse could not take those personal days for any reason or because the substitute wasn't available, then those 2 days would be paid as compensatory time at that nurse's daily rate. A nurse who serves 90 days or more in any step shall move to the next step on 9/1 of each subsequent year. Upon initial employment in the Gloucester Public Schools, nurses will receive full credit for every 1 year of relevant experience in nursing and or school nurse work up to a maximum of step 5. Through fiscal year 2023, if there are COVID related regulations or mandates instituted by the State Department of Public Health or DESE that nurses are required to perform, then $5 per hour increase for hours 36 to 40 would be implemented. And then substitute pay increases to $27 per hour. And the contract shall be in effect September 1st, 2021 to August 31st, 2024.
Questions?
So just to add to the discussion, for Keith and Bill, although I'm sure you probably may recognize this already. So we have been pretty consistent over the past couple of years trying to keep nurses in parity with the GTA. So this salary increase is equivalent to what we gave the GTA. Rather than taking off the first step and adding steps to the bottom is consistent with what we did with the GTA. So helps us in the hiring process, bringing in nurses at a higher pay rate. Yeah, and retention. So I just wanted those who didn't realize that, or the public, if they're listening, that it's pretty equivalent to what the GTA requested and approved.
Any more discussion? Okay, Maria, may we vote?
Ms. Prince?
Yes.
Mayor Verga?
Yes.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Weason?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
And Mr. Minio?
Yes.
That concludes the action. The next item is East Gloucester Veterans Memorial School update.
So a couple of things on that.
Huge.
Yeah, the steel is, so they're done with the steel on building A, which is the academic wing, and they are working very quickly on building B, which is the administrative offices, cafeteria, gymnasium, and a few other, art, music, thank you, spaces. We are gearing up for the topping off ceremony, which is April 13th. Hoping that, no, is that wrong? April 8th, Friday, April 8th, sorry.
Oh.
Friday, April 8th. Thank you. We're hoping that Kathy and the mayor will make some brief remarks there. And we started that process because we brought together the veterans and East Gloucester staff on Tuesday afternoon to come over to the building site and see it instead of getting a tour of the outside and looking at the steel. And they signed, they're first to sign the beam. Both staff, and I did as well, signed the beam. It's a white beam, it'll be the last beam that's put into place. And then today, or no, maybe tomorrow, I think it's tomorrow, the student nominations committee for the naming is going to go over there. They're going to film a video about the nomination process or the naming process, and they're going to sign the beam as well. And then on April 8th, the second graders will come over, sign the beam. There'll be some music played as the beam is going into place, that sort of thing. And we'll have some brief remarks. Folks will be standing around, so the remarks need to be brief. I haven't said that already. In terms of a couple of just developments, we're working and just trying to be good neighbors as we continue to try to be, and I think are being. We had one snafu. We've had at this point more than 50 deliveries, probably 60 deliveries of large trucks delivering materials. Everything from dirt to steel to machinery. A few weeks ago, got word of a truck that had trouble making a right-hand turn onto Webster, and then got sort of backed up in traffic, or caught in traffic, and then held up traffic some. And so because of that, talking to one of the neighbors, and also police, DPW, our project team, city councilor, made just a couple of changes on that. One was have school construction zone signs, along Eastern Avenue, warning people that there are large trucks around, and then also are making sure that whenever there's delivery, folks from the site are aware of it and then looking out in case the rare truck does have trouble with the backing up. What's good about this site, unlike a lot of deliveries in the city, is that they immediately pull off the road onto the construction site. They're not unloading anything on Webster Street. So that's just it's one of the values of that large site. So we made some adjustments in order just, as we get better, as we do things here. But again, there've been very, very, hardly any snafus at all in terms of deliveries. That's going well. We will be make sure all the neighbors know about, as we move into April, there will be some later nights as they do the concrete pours on each level of each building. So for example, the first concrete pour they'll do is on the second level of the building A, and that allows them to then protect below that from the elements. Hopefully just rain at that point, in order to start doing some of the work in the foundation basement area, plumbing and the like. But when they do those concrete pours of a whole entire level of the building, it's a long day, starts early, it goes late. There'll be some additional lighting there. The noise that happens later, and that means to like 8 o'clock sort of thing. It's not like, much later than that. Is just the smoothing machine, smoothing the concrete out, the wet concrete out. But we're going to be communicating to, that's probably the first week of April at this point. We'll be communicating to, leafleting the neighbors, putting on our website, emailing those folks who sign up for email notices, making sure city councilors know it, make sure, of course, you all know it. Just so folks, no surprises, and people are aware on the smaller nights where it's extended workday essentially. So all just trying to keep things on schedule, and also make sure that we're informing the neighborhood as best we can about any changes in the process. So hopefully you can join us on April 8th.
What time?
I believe it's 9:30, but we'll confirm.
Thanks.
Yeah.
This will be less formal.
It's less formal, yeah, less formal. Yeah.
Groundbreaking, but it'll be fun.
Yeah. And who doesn't like big cranes?
Yeah, 4-year-old.
Probably.
All right, any other new business? No? Okay, motion to adjourn from anybody?
So moved.
Second. Roll call vote, Maria, please.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Ms. Watson, Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
And Mr. Minio.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, who has plugged in and joined us this evening, and good night to everybody.